Hey, hello everyone. This is Moderate Rebels Live. I'm in person. It's pretty rare, but I'm sitting here with the Max Blumenthal.
Yeah, and I'm not actually shorter than Ben. We can't get his chair any lower, so it's kind of like when Jon Stewart, who's like 4'2", used to interview people, and they would always put their chairs much lower. So and also it highlights Ben's role as the kind of host, but
he's actually much taller than me, pretty significantly, a few inches.
In the comments, hello everybody. Yeah, everybody's I'm looking at the comments now, and everyone's all into these podcast wars. So we're just adding another ingredient to this. We're not like, I'm not trying to do this. Like, I'm not trying to be involved in all these podcast wars. With TYT was something that I ignored like for a long time. It was just like this sonic. It was like this wallpaper for normie lifestyles that I had no interest in, and suddenly kind of came into my life. And now there's some other clash taking place, and we're trying to do reporting. We're trying to do journalism. And same with Aaron Mate, who's caught up in the middle of this. But, you know, we got targeted for our journalism, and it wasn't just by this pampered, hyper entitled heiress who has spent a large portion of her adult life snorting away the public assets of Iran. It was an entire operation behind her that basically was looking to weaponize someone stupid enough to actually take us to a DC city court. And that's kind of what we want to talk about, is not just this legal action, but the entire operation that's been trying to take down the Grayzone because of our journalism. I'm assuming everyone who's watching this, you know, you got to at least skim the article that we published a few days ago. Ben actually came into town because we wanted to start, or really finish up, this documentary we've been working on about what's happening in Nicaragua. And then this decision comes down on Sulome Anderson versus Max Blumenthal and Ben Norton and 10 John Does, alleging that we were involved in this nefarious conspiracy directed by like gamma rays from the brain of Vladimir Putin to have us weaponize an entire troll farm of anonymous John Does to defame Sulome Anderson as a CIA or Mossad agent. So then, you know, the perfect thing to do to discredit allegations of being a Mossad agent is to get a famous pro-Israel lawyer who's like a literal Israel lobbyist from the largest corporate law firm to take to court these independent journalists who criticized you, and then accuse them of being involved in a conspiracy with a bunch of Twitter accounts they don't know, including time-traveling Russian hacker. That was the name of one of the Twitter John Does in her lawsuit, obviously referring to Joy Reid and her claim that Russians hacked her blog and made her say homophobic things. So there's so many layers of insanity to this. But it all started, I mean, I don't even know where you want to start here, but it all started with you early on when I took Grayzone out of alternate. Ben wrote like a short piece about Sulome Anderson admitting that her Hezbollah sources were unreliable.
Well, yeah, I think Max is kind of overwhelming people with details. So I think we should just go back to kind of what the basics are of this case. So in December 2018, we were sued and we weren't allowed to talk about it. This has been something that's really frustrated the two of us, because we were sued and we couldn't, there was, you know, it was a sensitive case and we couldn't make any public comments. So for 2.5 years, we've been forced to be silent about this case. But like Max said, I mean, this is an insane, frivolous case. It's completely political. And what was the goal of this case? The goal was very clear. And we'll talk about the plaintiff. She basically all but admitted it publicly. The goal was to, in her words, destroy us. She said she vowed to, quote, destroy me, and referring to me specifically. And then she also wanted to bankrupt the Grayzone. That was explicitly the goal. We're a very small operation, a very small team. We don't have much money. So this very rich heiress,
I mean, come on, look at the backdrop here. I mean, it's obvious we're loaded, but anyway, go on.
So this multimillionaire heiress who came into millions of dollars that were given to her, we'll talk about this, by the US government that were seized from the Iranian people. We'll talk about that whole case. But she's a multimillionaire. She sued us with an Israel lobbyist lawyer from one of the largest corporate law firms in Washington, D.C. And the goal, it was $1 million frivolous libel lawsuit. And the explicit goal, very clearly, was one, to try to get discovery, to get access to all of our private communications, to prove somehow that we're a secret Russian operation, which is false. There's no evidence. You can't prove it because it's not true.
Syrian or whatever. Or it's just something. They're trying to get something to discredit us.
And then the other goal was to destroy, to bankrupt the Grayzone. I mean, $1 million would mean that we'd have to shut down the website. We don't have $1 million, obviously. This is a small operation. So it was a political lawsuit, and the judge saw through it. After 2.5 years, it was delayed again and again and again. Then the pandemic came, and it was delayed. And finally, this June, the judge issued a devastating ruling. I mean, this decision, it just shows he barely hides his contempt for this absurd lawsuit. He says things like, I don't understand how the plaintiff can try to sue the defendants, us, for things that other people said. And what the judge also, by the way, established, I don't know if this is the first time legally, but he legally established that a retweet is not an endorsement. So according to U.S. law, that is...
It's not. It's a strong legal precedent that a retweet is not an endorsement. And one of the funniest sections, I don't know if we can read it, but he says the plaintiff complains that the defendants described her as notoriously sloppy. However, in one article, she made 5 major errors. He basically said, however, in fact, Sulome Anderson is a terrible journalist.
So for people watching here, and we're going to make this a podcast version later on, just audio, but for people watching now on the live stream, this is our article. It's called Judge Tosses Frivolous Lawsuit by Heiress Sulome Anderson Seeking to Destroy the Grayzone. There's a lot of stuff in here. We'll go through it today to talk about. It's kind of a complex case, but it's also a hilarious case. For anyone who wants to read it, it's in the description here of the YouTube, and I'll post it for the description in the podcast. But check this out. This is one of the longest corrections I've ever seen in my journalistic career. This is a correction that was issued after Sulome, the plaintiff suing us, wrote this article for Newsweek. And this Lebanese writer, his name's Ali Karani, he exposed just tons of falsehoods, of blatant errors in her story. And look at this. A 168-word, 7-sentence mini essay. These are all the corrections they issued. So what happened is that this writer, Sulome Anderson, she has dedicated her career to just spreading just ridiculous stories about Hezbollah, claiming that Hezbollah is planning attacks on the United States, claiming that Hezbollah is always on the verge of starting a new war with Israel, as if Hezbollah starts the war and not vice versa, as if Israel's not the one that starts the wars. Just doing all these ridiculous bogus stories with bogus sources. So I wrote a story back in this was 2017, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote 2018, I guess. I wrote a story right here, May 2018.
Yeah.
This is the story I wrote. It's actually a very clinical story. It's totally factual. It's called Sulome Anderson Admits Her Supposed Hezbollah Source is Incredibly Unreliable. And do you want to talk about this story? I mean, it shouldn't be scandalous.
Well, basically, I don't know if you can show the visual aid in the article that we brought to court. And I'll talk about the hearing later. I mean, it's absolutely insane that we actually had to show up in court. And in our preliminary hearing, this is a DC city court. It's Superior Court in DC. In our preliminary hearing, while we were sitting in the in the gallery, a lady was arguing or issuing a complaint against the city because her dog was taken off her lawn and taken away by the dog pound without her permission. So those were the kind of cases that the judge was accustomed to hearing. And then in comes Sulome Anderson and this, high profile Stuart Neuberger from Crowell and Mooring, the biggest corporate law firm. And they're here to argue that we engaged in this crazy Russian conspiracy. And the judge is just absolutely perplexed. So anyway, that was the preliminary hearing. And then in the actual hearing, we brought this visual aid, which will help you explain what Ben's article was about, what she was so mad about. All we brought And they didn't know we were going to do this. We just set it up on an easel, like an art
Here's us
easel.
in the woods of southern Lebanon with
We're with our and no, let's not confuse anyone. And so we just put this whiteboard in front of the judge, and it contains Salome's tweets. Go down. I know I look gangster and everything, but go down and you see she's claiming that Iran was firing missiles into Israel. She actually went online.
Well, into Israel occupied territory.
No. This says into Israel.
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
So she's basically the only person on Twitter. She's got a blue check mark. She's claiming she's like some first-rate, top-notch journalist who is like the greatest rising star in journalism. And she goes on Twitter and just alleges out of nowhere that Iran is waging a full-scale conventional war on Israel. Basically that World War III has broken out. Then she does it again and cites her Hezbollah source. And for those of you who followed this garbage journalism that she's been putting out, I mean, she publishes like one article every 6 months, but it gets in a mainstream outlet. She's always claiming that she has top-level access to Hezbollah, despite the fact that her father sued that organization and its Iranian sponsor and won something like $325 million in seized assets from it. She always claims she has these top sources. So she claims all of this on Twitter. Then all of a sudden people correct her and say, you're bonkers. And then she pulls back and says, oh, sorry, my Hezbollah source was unreliable. I'm going to take some time to figure out what's what here. And so Ben basically just wrote a short article about it. And then she sues $1 million lawsuit. We have to go to DC court several times, all because of that. We have to lawyer up. There was nothing that could have been plausibly construed as remotely defamatory or libelous in Ben's article, but nevertheless, we still had to do that. And I mean, look at some of the threats that she leveled against us leading up to that case. It was like, I don't know, something from like a B level, a really like something that wouldn't even have made it to like an Edward G. Robinson gangster film from the 30s or 40s, or like a really bad Aaron Sorkin script.
All right, here's an example. So again, for people not to confuse people, Sulome Anderson is this multimillionaire who sued us for exposing something that she admitted that her bogus supposed Hezbollah sources were feeding her false information. And we'll talk about this whole scheme in Lebanon. It's pretty well known by people in Lebanon that there are these people who like dress up like Hezbollah. They just put like masks on and stuff, and they deceive all of these dumb Western journalists into thinking that they're Hezbollah and getting these sexy stories, but it's totally fake. So this is her threatening to sue us back in May after I published the article. And she's talking to our lawyer, Bill Wins Again, Bill Moran, one of the best lawyers. This guy, we'll talk about him. He's a great guy. He always defends the underdog. And this is her, Sulome, saying, I wish I could see your faces when your client is served and you see the letterhead. You're playing with the big boys now, Moran. This has very little to do with defaming me. It has to do with the assault on a free press and the reasons behind it. I'm done trading insults. Ciao. So there's a few things to unpack here. First of all, she just exposes the entire game. She says, this has very little to do with defaming me. And she's suing us for defamation. So she's admitting it has nothing to do with libel.
She invalidated her entire lawsuit there and admits that it's a fishing expedition to, I don't know, look for our FSB, Igor somewhere behind us. But then she says, you're playing with the big boys now. So this says a lot about her, the plaintiff. It shows that she has been cultivated in an atmosphere of just pure entitlement and nepotism. And we wrote about her history of just being kicked upstairs from one elite institution to another, despite colossal failures because of her connections, mainly her dad, who I'll talk about in a second. And so she's basically saying that just because she has a powerful lawyer, she believes she can win, no matter what the merits of her case are or are not. And there were no merits, no matter what the letter of the law is. She just believes that the game is totally rigged in her favor. And so the Carinator, somebody called her the Carinator. That's exact. She's going to the manager of the Grayzone, which is the courts that she thinks she controls, with her pro-Israel, ultra-Zionist lawyer, Stuart Neuberger, who had won all of these judgments. her lawyer, I mean, this is another hilarious aspect of this case, that her lawyer had won all of these high profile judgments against official enemy states, designated satanic evildoers from the authoritarian axis, who can never show up in U.S. court. So he's basically arguing.
It's like suing a baby.
He's arguing against nobody, against the most demonized countries in the world, from Iran to Libya to various terrorist groups. I think he sued Al Qaeda once. It's like, what Bin Laden's lawyer is going to show up?
Well, he wrote a book also about these hijacked planes that they blamed on Libya, on Muammar Gaddafi, and Libya didn't represent itself. So he wrote a big book about it, his experience.
It's basically like winning a case against nobody. I mean, it wasn't like this guy was going up against some other top, like, Dershowitz character. And so actual Americans show up in court with lawyers that Sulome Anderson denigrated as dime store bullshit.
Here going back. Someone asked if she was calling us moron. No, she was actually writing Moran. Moran is the name of our lawyer. Again, this great guy. He's a working class dude who just defends people because he believes in it. He defends the underdog. And look at her tweets here. I mean, this is just how, like, arrogant she is. She said, "Your client is a bully and you're his attack dog." She's talking to our lawyer, Moran. "But he fucked with the wrong journalist this time. I have plenty of resources," boasting of her wealth, "and I'm determined to use them to my full advantage to teach your client a lesson about throwing stones while living in a glass house.
I'll be in touch."
So she's boasting, "I'm rich, and I have," like, what she's implicitly saying is, "I have this really powerful pro-Israel lawyer who worked for my dad and got $40 million from the government of Iran that the U.S. government seized from the Iranian people and gave to my family. And we're going to use this lawyer to sue you in this frivolous lawsuit."
Yeah, I mean, it's a really classic imperial pathology where you take money from a besieged people in the third world. I mean, this is the money of the Iranian people that would have been used to fund their healthcare system, for example. They actually do have a public healthcare in Iran. And then you spend it to demonize them and try to start a war with them and attack anyone who gets in your way, and even sue anyone who gets in your way. I mean, how sick is that? That is just, I mean, there's nothing wrong with her. Theoretically, there's nothing wrong with inheriting wealth. I mean, a lot of people who inherit wealth could be class traders who use the wealth to actually further a real progressive agenda. There's a lot of people who inherit wealth who do good charitable works. But what she chooses to do with her wealth is to try to start wars with fake sources. And I think we should go right into it. We should go into her fake sources.
Well, yeah, no, I want
unless you want to go.
But really quickly, just while we're talking about the money thing here, because I think this is a really important detail. We've been talking about how her father. We'll talk about Terry Anderson. He was a reporter for the Associated Press in Lebanon during the Lebanese Civil War when the U.S. military invaded, and he was a U.S. military veteran and was walking around Lebanon with a belt that had the U.S. Marine Corps on it. And
he was a former Marine, and the Marines had just invaded Lebanon. The Marines were actually shelling parts of Lebanon. And he's walking around with a Marine belt buckle and hanging out at the U.S. Embassy, according to the New York Times original report. That was kind of scrubbed from the report that's online now. And so allegedly, Shia militant groups, Hezbollah didn't exist at the time, but the Shia militant groups that were resisting the Israeli and U.S. occupations took him for a spy and kidnapped
something
him.
He denied. He denied being a spy. He admitted in his book that he was hanging out with the U.S. Embassy and was seen with U.S. Embassy staff. So they saw him and assumed he was a spy, which he denied.
Well, I mean, it was sort of a footnote in his book, this is a central detail. It's like, why did they kidnap you? Why did they target you? And and according to a book reviewer, there was just a footnote in his book, which is weird. But, Terry Anderson is held for 6 or 7 years. He gets out. His daughter's 6 years old when he gets out, and they file a series of lawsuits against the Iranian government, which can't represent us in U.S. court and has had all of its assets seized in various financial institutions and banks because it had this revolution and turned against the West. Very much like what's happening with Venezuela right now, where, for example, the Bank of England has stolen several $1 billion of gold belonging to the Venezuelan government. So that money, they have a trial, and it's basically a sham trial. Stuart Neuberger, who just wants to take down Iran because he's a Zionist, shows up in he's the counsel. And one of his experts is a guy named Patrick Clausen. He is one of the most ferociously anti-Iran neoconservative fanatics in Washington. He actually publicly called for Israel to stage a false flag attack to start a war with Iran in order to drag the U.S. into a regime change war with Iran. So that's who the expert witness was. I don't even know how legitimate it was that Iran was even behind this, but they got loads of money.
Here's the relevant section from her book, just for people watching this here. So she says, sometimes after we moved to Athens, my family sued Iran for, that's a city in the U.S., not Athens, Greece. My family sued Iran for sponsoring the terrorists who kidnapped Dad. And she says, my parents and I actually filed 3 separate lawsuits. And when I was 15 years old, I was awarded somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 million in frozen Iranian assets held in the United States after taxes and lawyers' fees. And then she adds, all that money went straight to a trust fund, of course. My parents collectively received settlements of around $40 million, and our lives abruptly changed. So they became like 10 millionaires basically overnight.
So her dad blew all the money pretty quickly on bad business deals and like investing in his friends' restaurants and like, you know, I'm going to invest in the Blue Parrot and down in South Florida, and it all dried up. And then she didn't really handle the money very responsibly either, apparently, as this pretty key quote will show you.
All right, look, she and we'll get to this. People were saying that we were making fun of addiction. We say in the article that, of course, people who have addiction deserve compassion, deserve empathy. It's a serious problem. But these rich, entitled multimillionaires cannot use it as an excuse to try to destroy the lives of people they have political disagreements with. And quotes from this in her book show that she's actually she flaunts the fact that her family took tens of millions of dollars from the Iranian people. This is a quote. This is a passage directly, a screenshot from her book. Quote, because of the lawsuits my family won against Iran, I had all the money in the world to spend on drugs, and I made some dealers a lot of money.
Wait. Just keep that quote. I mean, keep that whole thing on screen. Just put it full screen.
It's on there.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Get us out of there. All right. This is crazy because, I mean, there's so much here, but just look at I didn't even realize it when I first was reading it. But the next paragraph is just like a whole, it's just what she says there. It takes my head spins after I read it. It's like, whoa, you just said that you stole all this money from Iran and then snorted it, spent it all on drugs.
The U.S. government took it from Iran on her behalf.
Yeah. Took it for the U.S. government took all this money from like people who are under siege and sanctions, living through deprivation, the war with Iraq, where hundreds of thousands,
1 million people
died
over 8 years of a brutal war.
And then you give all the money to drug dealers. And then the next line, instead of reflecting on that or having something to say about that, or talking about your guilty conscience, you say that you just went out and
I want to read this. When I was 23, I met Michael, a 40-year-old ex-Army Ranger. I was out at a bar one night and took him home. He had a girlfriend at the time, which I didn't find out about until later, but he must have seen me and thought, jackpot.
So that's just the next line. There's no reflection about taking all that money from Iran and giving it to drug dealers. It's just like, well, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I fucked some guy, some Army Ranger, and I'm the shit. I'm jackpot, baby. And like, honestly, no, I'm not even gonna say anything. But like, something's really wrong with you. And the point of this book is it's supposed to be inspirational. It's supposed to be for other like sad rich girls with daddy issues or something who had suffered from addiction, that she overcame it. But if you look at the book, she is just like a transparently horrible person, narcissist who is a just full scale imperialist. And I mean, you can just read some.
And again, I mean, because we'll get to this in a second. She and other people say,
yes. Great comment. Who writes a memoir in their early 20s? The only people who do that are like really sick people. Like Ayaan Hirsi Ali has like 5 memoirs. Like, does she have any other books?
Ayaan Hirsi Ali, if people don't know, she's this neocon who's married to like this major right wing.
Who also made up her life story.
She made up her life story and admitted it in this Dutch documentary.
So that's who writes memoirs.
But anyway, I mean, look, I just want to say this again. Yeah, I shouldn't have to say this, but people attacking us saying that we were making fun of her drug addiction. No, we're not doing that at all. Again, people deserve compassion, especially working class and poor people. But the reality is, if you read her book, you get the idea very clear. She is very narcissistic and proud of the fact that she inherited these millions of dollars and everything was handed to her on a golden platter. So it's very different. We're not making fun of her addiction. We're pointing out that this is an example of entitlement. And just look at some of these quotes from her book. I mean, it is really shocking, and it just shows how out of touch she is. All right, here we go. These are some quotes from her book. Quote, "I would often find myself doing lines off the toilet lid in the school restroom or running around town with some guy rolling on ecstasy." Then she went to NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. Tuition there is around $60,000 a year. And she wrote, "College was one long party, not the fun kind, but the kind where you wake up the next day feeling like shit and swear never to do that again. In many ways, I never got to the waking up part." well, what a revealing quote there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I know a lot of people who've I don't want to dwell on this point too much, but I know people who've dealt with addiction, overcome addiction, but it's not even about that. It's about being conscious. It is about being humble. It is about being reflective. And her lawsuit against us revealed a much deeper pathology than addiction or mental illness. And then her response to our article holding her accountable was that she didn't even mention the lawsuit. It was just that she's overcome mental illness and addiction, and please look to her as a great example. And to all the people attacking me and trying to drag me down, well, like, the haters don't mean nothing. But it was like kind of like, I don't care about the haters, as if she hadn't initiated this malicious McCarthyite action along with 2 years worth of smears. Now, I think it's really important here to note that if this person indeed suffered from so much mental illness and addiction and was a lost soul, then what is this ultra Zionist powerful lawyer from one of the largest law firms in DC, along with a coterie of neoconservative operatives and corporate media hacks, including Jake Tapper and Jonathan Chait, what are they doing egging her on to do this when we knew that she was heading into an abyss and it was not going to work out well for her? Where is their responsibility here? They were basically using her as like kind of like a suicide bomber against the Grayzone. A lawyer is supposed to actually tell you when your action is not going to work out. They're supposed to hold you back from walking into a legal trap. And her lawyer, he's like an old man. He's supposedly been through some of the most difficult, complex legal actions in international legal actions in recent history. And he led her straight into this. So where are the consequences for him? Where are the consequences for Jake Tapper, who promoted this lawsuit? Or Jonathan Chait from the New York Magazine, this little rat-faced neoliberal hack who called us domestic extremists. Like he wanted the FBI to get sicked on us. It seems like people were just so overwhelmed with their hatred for us. And remember, this lawsuit came down at the height of Russiagate, and they thought that they could exploit this atmosphere of Russiagate and that everybody that they didn't like was going to go down for colluding with Russia, because they imagined that everybody who's possibly who has like anti-imperialist opinions must be controlled by Russia. Anyone who goes against the establishment is colluding with Russia. They just imagined that it was all going to work out, despite the obvious, clear fact that it wouldn't. And so they did this to her.
Well, here's Jonathan Chait's tweet. Again, for people who don't know, this is a neoliberal writer at the New York Magazine, and this is his tweet. he's sharing Sulome Anderson's frivolous lawsuit back in December 2018. He said, "This story is really worth your time. Her father was taken hostage in Lebanon for 6 years. Now she reports there and is being smeared by domestic extremists." That's what he's calling us.
Yeah, and the FBI has a category on its website, a very large category for domestic extremism. The Biden DHS just released a new domestic extremism report. That is the new focus of the Biden administration, is domestic extremism. So he's basically trying to place us in a category of people who should be monitored by the federal authorities for our political opinions. And these are people who claim to not just be capital D Democrats, but small d Democrats. Really what they are little authoritarian tyrants, McCarthyites. This is a new McCarthyism.
Well, and because Max has mentioned it, I just want to show really quickly for people who don't know. This is the lawyer that she hired. It's also pretty funny because Sulome Anderson claims to be pro-Palestinian in some ways, although that's absurd because a lot of her work is actually just helping the U.S. and Israeli narrative against Palestine and any resistance to Zionism. But this is the lawyer that she hired, an ultra-Zionist lawyer. Here it says explicitly, he works in the law firm's Israel practice. This is a guy who is a key part of the Israel lobby. So she can't claim anymore to support Palestine. She allied with an Israel lobbyist to try to destroy us, one of the few independent journalist outlets in the U.S. that actually does report on the resistance to Zionism. I mean, this is it shows when these liberals, these capital D Democrats and liberals in the mainstream corporate media claim to support Palestine, how superficial and thin it is. They actually don't. They actually ally many times with these fervent right-wing supporters of Israel.
But yeah, and just to reinforce the point I was making, I mean, you look at Neuberger, he says that he's in touch with the State Department, he's in touch with all of these, the World Bank, he works with all these elite institutions, but he's responsible for this legal action. One of the most irresponsible lawsuits waged in recent history, destroyed by a local DC Superior Court judge who, as I said, typically deals with people who are fighting custody battles for their dog.
So here really quickly, yeah. This is Crowell & Moring, one of the largest corporate law firms in Washington D.C. Stuart Neuberger. Just take a look at his bio here. This is incredible. He boasts of having extensive contact with international organizations such as the United Nations and the World Bank and IMF, executive and regulatory agencies, including the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the European Commission, and the U.S. Congress. Meanwhile, if you all remember, the plaintiff, Sulome, was smearing our lawyer, a working class guy, as dime store bullshit in her terms.
Yeah. Well, right. And I mean, just look at the complaint. If you really want to be entertained, look at her complaint. It is the most insane thing I've ever read. It's really like the diary of a mad person. It's like someone went away for a long time into the hills and took something psychedelic that they found and just wrote this.
Too many mushrooms.
Without like David, who wrote Psalms, who became King David. He actually had some literary talent. I don't know. I mean, yeah, he's Jewish. We're like good writers. Neuberger, I don't know what the hell's wrong with this guy. He seems to have no sense of humor and he can't write. So, and then he obviously thinks I'm like a self-hating Jew and an anti-Semite. But look, at least I still kept a sense of humor and I'm a much better writer than you are. So I don't know. The neocons, I always thought like the neocons are the Jews who aren't funny and, are boring. Anyway, but I wanted to, the point that I'm making is this is not just about Sulome Anderson and her stupid ass Israel lobbyist lawyer. This is about our elite institutions.
Yeah. And this is from Shadowban, this comment right here. These are the people they let fail us.
So go to the piece and the part about this committee to protect journalists is really significant. First of all, Sulome Anderson, got her entree into the world of elite journalism first through Columbia Journalism School, which costs over like $116,000 for a year and a half or 2 years, basically to graduate with a master's.
Yeah,
it's totally useless. Let me just
Yeah.
do my thing here. It's totally useless. Like if you go to journalism school, you're just there to like make connections with other elite conformists. And there's no reason you don't learn a skill. Like people learn skills in like high school auto shop, or like when I was like took wood shop in elementary school, you learn skills. You don't learn anything there. It's just about meeting fellow elites and getting on the good side of your professors who work in like the New Yorker or whatever.
Someone said it's an MSNBC apprenticeship.
Exactly.
It's exactly what it is.
You know, if that, it's a farm system for one of the most failed, hated institutions in human history, which is the US media. And she goes there.
Well, we should read from her book.
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So she gets in there because of her dad.
So check this out. All right. Before that.
Oh, no. Yeah, I got the order reversed. Okay, read this.
So this is an exact quote from her book. She mentions that college was a long party for her. And following that long party, graduating from NYU, she writes, quote, "In 2009, at age 24, I started interning at the Committee to Protect Journalists. And I won't lie and say I didn't get that job because of my father, who was on the board of directors."
Well, it's not about lying. You just came out and said it because, I don't know, you're proud of it or whatever.
When we were talking about other drug use, it wasn't to make fun of addiction. It's to point out this is this entitled person who's been handed everything in her life on a silver platter. Every job she's gotten, every connection, and then she just blows all that money. She admits it. She just blows all the money and partying and having fun and drugs.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
as a commenter said, that's a little too on the nose.
Yeah.
So this is why the Committee to
Protect,
or
in the nose.
Yeah.
Someone said, or in the nose.
So this is why this is significant. The Committee to Protect Journalists. And it's very significant on today because today is Julian Assange's 50th birthday. And
July 3rd.
Well, July 3rd. Okay.
July 3rd.
All right. July 3rd. Today we celebrated it in front of the Justice Department. So I got a little confused. We had a protest there. But Julian Assange is someone who's been basically thrown under the bus by what is supposed to be the premier press freedom organization, the Committee to Protect Journalists. The Committee to Protect Journalists is a billionaire, corporate-backed organization that also pushes regime change in places like Nicaragua. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole there, but you can see that they give internships to the children of their the chairman of their board, Terry Anderson. They gave her an internship. But the significant thing about this is that Sulome Anderson also said that she was going to take all the money she won from us, and her allies said she wanted to take my house where we're recording this right now. It's not exactly like a Loudoun County McMansion where all the lobbyists live. She wanted to take everything we had, and she said she was going to donate it all to the Committee to Protect Journalists. So a press freedom organization was apparently willing, considering that her father is chairman of the board and she interned there, to take everything that two independent journalists owned who are supported by you and take it in a lawsuit that was one of the most vicious attacks on press freedom. We haven't even gotten into this part. Just follow me here. This lawsuit would have made it possible for any of you watching this right now to be sued by any powerful entity because of someone you didn't even know who happened to share the same ideology as you said on Twitter, because that's what we were being sued for. And that powerful entity could have gotten discovery into your private communications to determine whether you knew those entities. It would have shut down Twitter. It would have shut down all social media, and it would have destroyed any independent media outlet that can't afford lawyers to parry the blow of powerful corporate lawyers. And it obviously would have targeted adversarial journalists, people who go after corporations, people who go after the empire. That was the ultimate point of this lawsuit. I don't think that it should be, law journals should write about this. It should be a much bigger scandal, because the consequences of this lawsuit, if a judge had validated it, would have been catastrophic for media, and only rich neocons would have been able, and MSNBC types would have been able to speak in the public square. And the Committee to Protect Journalists, I want to know, were they involved here? Did they know about this? Because in this prepared statement promoting her lawsuit on Medium, which really read like corporate PR, really read like someone helped her prepare it and say the right things, she pledged to give them everything. And what was her father's role? What was Terry Anderson's role here?
Well, and I just want to point out, this isn't just speculation on our part. It's pretty incredible with social media these days. She and her friends, Sulome and her friends, just kind of spelled everything out openly on Twitter. I mean, it wasn't very smart. So here's a part in our article that's extremely important. We're talking about all the neoconservative forces. We'll get to them in a second. We'll talk about the powerful neocons who were backing this frivolous lawsuit against us. But there was one guy, this weird troll on the internet. He's mostly irrelevant. Jett Goldsmith. He writes for Bellingcat, which is like a CIA troll farm, NATO troll farm funded by the U.S. government.
He's like the Chucky doll of the neoconservative movement. Look, put a picture of him up. He's like this fucking psychotic Chucky doll. It's like he was animated, like someone pulled him out of an attic and like shot like poisonous radiation into him, and he came to life as a Bellingcat troll.
Well, anyway, so these are some tweets. This is this warmongering group that was lobbying for regime change in Syria, saying the white helmets need to sue Vanessa Beeley, Eva Bartlett, Peter Hitchens, Max Blumenthal, and anyone else who think they can get away with slandering these heroes. Are there some lawyers that can help? And this guy, Jett Goldsmith, who again works for Bellingcat, which is funded by the U.S. and British government.
He's contributed to them.
He contributes.
But let me just say there is a significant detail, which is that he's said to have carried out research for one of these trials of Syrian bad guys in Germany where they're trying to subvert international law.
This is all lawfare. It's legal warfare.
So he's definitely like in the know here.
And he tweeted, and this is important. He said, there's an undisclosed firm handling Sulome Anderson case to this extent. And they said, that's
Sulome
fantastic.
Anderson.
Yeah. And then he said, yes, the issues. He said, discovery in this case will lay the foundation for many things. So this is a neocon operative, regime change lobbyist, just spelling it all out, that this lawsuit was part of a larger legal warfare, lawfare campaign targeting the anti-war, anti-imperialist movement, anti-war journalists to try to hold us accountable by, I think they all assumed, because they're insane conspiracy theorists, they assumed that we all work for Russia or something. But it was meant to be the opening salvos of a legal warfare campaign against the entire anti-war movement.
Yeah, and especially against people who were critics of the dirty war on Syria and the White Helmets. I mean, I did a lot of damage to the White Helmets PR operation because I wrote for a progressive, fairly well-known publication, a series of investigative pieces on the White Helmets in 2016 at a time when they were really they were winning Oscars for propaganda films about them. They're being nominated for the Nobel Prize. And what were they but the sort of fake civil society auxiliary arm of Al-Qaeda and its allies, operating exclusively in areas taken over by NATO-backed extremist insurgent forces seeking to destroy and ravage Syria. It was a huge scandal, and they were backed with tens of millions of dollars from the U.S. government through USAID and the British Foreign Office in Qatar. And so I published these articles, and one was about the PR firm that was basically making the White Helmets into this celebrity, this cause celeb for these, dumbass celebrities like Coldplay who never lift a finger for Palestinians when they're, just getting mowed down left and right for trying to walk to what used to be Palestine and is now Israel. So before my articles came out, I started getting harassed, not just online, but offline. I was getting harassing phone calls and I was getting harassing WhatsApp messages. And well, it was pretty clear who the WhatsApp messages were from. I don't know how they obtained my number. Well, I kind of do, but I didn't give out my number to these cats. One of them was from Omar Az Khaderji. I mean, they're just a long tirade of crazy messages I got in my WhatsApp threatening me from this guy. You can see him on the left. This is him trying to hide a boner for a Vice article he did about what he called Jew glasses, which were glasses that Orthodox Jews wore to make everything blurry so they wouldn't see women when they went out in public and wouldn't want to have sex. And he was trying to be a laddie mag writer. You can see he looks like a complete dork, and then he grows a beard and gets this whole tough guy frontline journalist makeover for the dirty war on Syria. And you can see him on the right in a very coordinated action along with some operatives from a UK government-funded think tank called Quilliam heckling Jeremy Corbyn and really launching the campaign against Corbyn to paint him. They're calling him a genocide denier at a anti-war rally. So Oz Chatterjee, you know, he couldn't really hold a job. Like he probably couldn't even survive. Like if you gave him a metal detector and sent him to the beach to find loose change, he probably couldn't even hold it together. Piece, but somehow he
wrote this piece in 2012 for Vice. Can these blurry glasses stop me perving over women?
Yeah, and I mean, this is the kind of stuff he used to do. And then all of a sudden he shows up like as one of the,
holding some Viagra.
Yeah.
With those glasses. Like this is the guy that they recruited to like help wage the dirty war in Syria.
I mean, yeah, he found kind of a niche attacking leftists who were anti-war. So I started getting messages from him before my article came out. And then I was getting harassing phone calls. So I was actually walking down the street with my friend Dan Cohen, and I saw a call come in from a number I didn't recognize. I was like, Dan, just hit record on your phone real quick. I put on speaker, and it was Idris Ahmad. I don't know if any of you know this rageaholic online stalker who somehow has a job at Sterling University, but it's definitely his voice. And he was just screaming at me, you motherfucker, you motherfucker. He was like, this rabid Scottish accent. And, you know, I publicized the audio of it, but this is before I published an article. So you have these guys who are clearly part of an operation, very adjacent to the British deep state to suppress critical reporting of one of the biggest scandals of our times, the funding of the White Helmets and of the dirty war itself.
Well,
trying to intimidate a journalist before they published a factual investigation.
Here's the text message that he sent Max. Somehow he got his number, and when history is written, those who stood with the oppressed will be remembered.
Isn't history already written?
Yeah.
Or when it's written.
Publish your pro-fascist filth, Max. We're waiting for it. We're expecting your peace.
Stop my dad's not killing kids in Yemen, but I understand, however, blah, blah, blah.
We're expecting your peace.
And it's also
so
like,
absurd.
Go back. I understand, however, what kind of like real, like intimidating guy, you want to intimidate me, don't say, I understand, however, that attacking Syrian civilians is more your cup. I understand, however, that's not intimidating. That's not menacing language. So I knew that it was him. That's the textbook kind of language that he uses. And then Idris Ahmad.
And just so you get an idea of who these people are.
So
I mean,
no,
this
wait, let's bring it home.
They're just neocons. Like,
yes, they're neocons, but let's bring it home. Oz Chatterjee had apparently crafted it appears to me that he crafted this legal complaint, this bonkers legal complaint, because he was bragging about how awesome it was to our lawyer, Bill Moran, before we even saw it, before it even saw the light of day. He was talking and he was rattling off, because these guys they're not that bright. Like they don't realize that also wrecks her case. And so they're bragging about how amazing it is. So they have been on us for years, trying to take us down through basically illicit means, rather because they know that they can't engage with our journalism and the facts therein. So they're looking for any way to destroy us. And here it is. I mean, you had the tweets up.
Yeah, I mean, these tweets are really revealing because they show that Oz Chatterjee knew what the specific charges were against us in the suit before it was public. So he was clearly conspiring with Sulome Anderson. Look, he says you're being sued for defamation and tortious interference. No average person would know what tortious interference is unless they actually saw the lawsuit.
Go up a little.
So he's clearly, and this is our lawyer, Bill Moran, one of the best. Shout out to Bill.
Go up.
Great guy.
Well, I don't know where it is, but there's another tweet. I mean, it must be a separate screenshot where he said, how does Max have that house? And he was part of some sort of probably with Crowell and Mooring researching what assets I had. So he was clearly indicating participation who paid for Max's house in DC? I mean, I actually paid for it with a loan from the city, and it's not, like I said, it's not exactly a Loudoun County McMansion.
Right here. Who paid for Max's house in
and they
DC,
aim to
Bill?
take my house because that's one of the only assets I have.
So what they're also implying is that like Vladimir Putin paid for your house or something.
Yeah.
And here he also wishes for me to have a heart attack. You're confident. Hit me up when you receive the complaint. By the way, he's again acknowledging that he was involved in the lawsuit before because he's saying, hit me up when you receive the complaint. He's clearly seen the complaint.
Yeah.
Hopefully Ben doesn't have a full-on heart attack when he reads it. He's going to need to be healthy for the case. So these neocon warmongers who openly support, I want to stress this, they openly support Western military intervention in Syria and other countries, openly supported the NATO butchery that destroyed Libya. They're open warmongers, and they were involved in helping to craft this lawsuit against us, a frivolous lawsuit to try to destroy us.
Yeah.
And they admitted on Twitter.
And so, I mean, this is someone who, like I said, he got fired from some low-level position at Sky News. He was writing for Daily Mail, like really low-level copy about just the most banal stuff. And he was fired because he wouldn't stop attacking Peter Hitchens in the office because he's a Daily Mail columnist. But his name shows up on open letters published in The Guardian of people like J.K. Rowling and Jimmy Wales and all of these prominent British figures calling Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite a day before British national elections. He was somehow called to testify in the House of Lords by one of the lords on Syria. It's clearly what I'm saying. This is clearly an operation.
And I just want to point out something our lawyer said here. Bill always wins. I hope you didn't spend the money on the plane ticket already, because a bag of potato chips, yet alone an attorney, could get this dismissed in a matter of weeks. It took a little longer than Bill anticipated, but he was right. It was dismissed because it was obviously an absurd case. So, Bill, thank you, Bill Moran. Again, he's the best.
Yeah. It's funny how these people come out of Vice. Like so many of these fuckers have come out of Vice.
Well, we should talk about, so we want to talk about some of the powerful people who were promoting this lawsuit against us. We mentioned Jake Tapper, the CNN host. He promoted the lawsuit. We mentioned Jonathan Chait of New York Magazine.
Jake Tapper hates me because I wrote a series of pieces also at Alternate when he was being hailed as the greatest newsman in history, as someone who's normalizing neoconservatism. And he actually was DMing people who were sharing the article and saying, why are you sharing this? How dare you? Like people he didn't even know. And they would send me these DMs and be like, Jake Tapper's in my DMs. This is crazy. So he's also one of the most thin-skinned people in the Beltway hack pack.
We have some good.
Go to this one.
Yeah.
Because, I never got this blew up like last year. I wrote this like in 2017, but last year it blew up that Jake Tapper wrote this rap parody about like Beltway media hacks and like in like this gangster rap battle, and he used the N-word. And I just thought that was kind of scandalous. So I wrote about it, and it blew up last year, but no one wanted to credit me because all of the like dweeb, like democratic socialist influencers, they don't want to be like citing the Grayzone.
Yeah, they always boycott us. So then other people
it.
share it and they just don't credit us.
Anyway,
but
we can read some Jake Tapper lyrics.
Well, no, but here are the other ones. These are good pieces if you want to check them out. Max did a series, Thirsting for War, CNN's Jake Tapper turned to strange, shady series.
Well, that's when he used a 6-year-old girl, Bana Alabed, as his source on what's happening in Syria. And she was a Turkish intelligence. I mean, she's a real person, but she was basically a Turkish intelligence
And
operation.
she later did ads for Turkish corporations on Turkish TV.
After meeting with Erdogan and Lindsay Lohan. I don't know if we can put video up of that.
Yeah,
We're going down the rabbit hole.
But then
go back to the other article. These are great articles, but people get bored with serious stuff. Okay, let's just shout out to Jake Tapper. Can we go down? Okay.
Again, we're mentioning Jake Tapper because he promoted this totally frivolous lawsuit against us. Here's the article that was published at Salon. Gangbanging in media land.
And they have like Howell Raines and Peter Beinart dressed up like gangster rappers. It's like, actually, I contacted the editor of Salon at the time, David Talbot, who's a friend of mine, and he said, I don't remember the article, but it seems really racist. I don't know how it got published there. And then he said Tapper was always just like an establishment tool who wanted to be
biatch, H to the Izzo.
Let's read a Okay, this is from Jake Tapper's. What is the article called? Gang banging in Media Land. This is by Jake Tapper. The TNR crew, referring to the New Republic, had been known for drive-bys for years. Franz and Moody, whatever young Nizzo was living Lizarge. So he basically uses the N-word. LW Cool
That's
J.
Leonard Wiesenthal. What's his
Yeah,
Wiesenthal?
Yeah. Leon Wieseltier, referring to Leon Wieseltier, who's like a kind of neocon who
they supported the Iraq War.
He's a liberal interventionist.
They were the liberals who supported the Iraq War.
He was a signer of the PNAC documents. LW Cool J and his posse would side hoe in their P ride and turn the Charlie Rose Green Room into a killing field.
Oh my god!
So
anyway, whatever. People get the point. Like this is
he's talking about an all-white editorial staff of a magazine, the New Republic, that dedicated an entire issue to trying to prove that black people were genetically inferior to white people, and he's making them into black stereotypes, and it makes Hamilton look like completely normal. And
now he's seen as like a beacon of the liberal resistance. At least during Trump, Jake Tapper he had great ratings. He did constant anti-Trump coverage, was seen as like this great liberal white savior.
When all along we knew he was a fake yapper.
He's a total neocon. He supports every war.
But he promoted her lawsuit.
This frivolous lawsuit against us.
That would have destroyed online media. Who else do we got?
Liz Wall. And she's probably just too low.
No. This is classic. I mean, what did Liz Wall say?
Good for you. I have thought about suing Max Blumenthal too.
Everybody's thought about suing me. Just why not? Just what the hell? Liz Wall, for those of you who don't remember, she had her like phony RT on air resignation over the annexation of Crimea. And
she worked for RT.
Yeah, she worked for RT.
She was like a totally apolitical TV host who previously worked for RT.
She interviewed me a few times there, and she, was just like nodding her head. It was like I was like Charlie Brown's teacher. I was like, wah, 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 wah. And she was like, yeah. So she didn't believe in anything, but she wanted to have a career as a celebrity journalist, just like Sulome Anderson. I mean, they're very similar characters who really don't believe in anything and want to get big. So what do you do to get big in Washington? You cater to hardcore neocons at the dawn of a new Cold War. The new Cold War was beginning. She resigns on air, live on RT. Chris Hayes called it remarkably badass what she did. But what I did was I went and exposed her stunt as actually a coordinated PR operation where she was actually working with Bill Kristol's a think tank run by Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan. And they were actually
the Foreign Policy Initiative.
These people are so stupid. I mean, you could imagine what would happen if they actually had the nuclear football in their hands. Like they just on their own Twitter account, they were like T-minus 15 minutes, big, like something big is going to happen on
Tune
RT.
into RT.
Yeah, so it was obvious that they were coaching her, and then she shows
word on the street says you're really going to want to tune into RT. Something big may be going down. I wonder what they know.
So then she shows up with Jamie Kirchick taking all these selfies.
They tweet a selfie.
Like great operational security there. So it's obvious that they were all working together and that this was conceived by Kirchick. Kirchick is like, before the Grayzone, he was the guy who was always trolling me, always calling me a self-hating Jew and obsessively writing about me. I don't know. He kind of went away, but
and then she ran, and then Liz Wall ran for Congress.
So Liz Wall failed in her bid to become this celebrity journalist. She ran for Congress as a Democrat in Texas, and her slogan was like "a wall you can support," reference to Trump's "Build the Wall." I think what did she get? Like, did anyone vote for her? Like,
maybe her parents. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like you couldn't get like 2 votes if your parents voted for you. It's like when Eminem said you couldn't sell 2 copies if you made a double album. It was like that. So we got CJ Whirlyman.
Man. All right, we got to talk about this. CJ Whirlyman, one of the weirdest characters really out there in media. All right, people don't know. CJ Whirlyman is like this Australian surfer bro who moved to the US, got a thick Australian accent, and he got his career as he got his start as like a new atheist with a capital N, capital A, super Islamophobic, friends with like all of the big new atheist people like Richard Dawkins, and they later had some arguments, but at first they were all friends. And then what happened is he was accused of rampant plagiarism. He just stole.
Wait. I think we're jumping ahead a little bit. He also was a huge racist who would talk about like fucking his Thai maid or stuff like that.
Just insane racist like frat bro tweets.
He then went to Alternet to be an environmental journalist, which is like the perfect way into like I guess liberal respectability. I mean, the environment it's so controversial. And he plagiarized, I think there was over 30 instances of plagiarism at Alternet. And so he was just sent packing.
And then he just became, I don't know what happened. He just like totally rebranded, and he's now become like the leading propagandist for insane head chopping Salafi jihadist groups. And I mean, check out some of this stuff. Like some of his tweets are absolutely bonkers. All right. He now writes a lot for Turkish and Qatari media and just does insane propaganda. And this is one of his tweets in 2020. He CJ Werleman, who again, he promoted this lawsuit against us, hoping that it would destroy the Grayzone. He said, quote, "Turkey's war against the criminal Assad regime in Syria is a just war. It's a humanitarian and righteous war. It's a good war. And anyone who tells you otherwise is most certainly not anti-war." This is Turkey ethnically cleansed the northern parts of Syria in alliance with Al-Qaeda, with rebranded Al-Qaeda HTS, and like just unleashed these insane mercenaries that killed people. And that's not even the worst of it. I mean, he also, as I point out, this is a guy who used to be like an Islamophobe. And he wrote this article in an Australian newspaper about how the former spokesperson for Syrian Al-Qaeda reached out to him. Here, this is from his own article. Abu Suleiman contacted me to thank me for what he described as my impartial reporting on the Syrian civil war. Although he has acted as a media spokesman for the former Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria's Al-Nusra Front, now known as Jabhat Fatah al-Sham.
This is the guy that like basically Al-Qaeda in Syria went on its first PR front, and they got CJ Werleman and Murtaza Hussain from The Intercept to interview this Australian criminal who had grifted millions of dollars out of the state for fake Islamic daycare programs and then he became a criminal fugitive and showed up in Syria as the spokesman for Syrian Al-Qaeda because he spoke English, and CJ writes a puff piece on him. I mean, and so did Murtaza Hussain at The Intercept, which we now call The Interventionist or The Interslept. I don't know what you want to call it. But I mean, this guy's so weird. He went from being like this Islamophobic surfer himbo to being like the Salafi jihadi white non-Muslim ally. I mean, I would say, okay, it's understandable if you converted to Islam. And I've seen him actually write tweets where he says like refers to Muhammad and says PBUH, like peace be upon him. Like, but he's not.
I don't think he's Muslim. I think he's still an atheist. He also just, what's funny is all these people project what they do onto us. They're all mercenaries. He writes a ton for Qatari and Turkish media. He's very state media. He's very close to like Muslim Brotherhood groups and all, and he gets money from them clearly. But then I don't know if he what his. Well, no, he's paid by Turkish state media and Qatari media to contribute regularly.
I don't know. I just want to be careful here not to say anything.
I'm not saying that
back up.
No, but he's a regular contributor to those media outlets. I mean, whatever.
It's weird. They're the only people who will publish him. But no, then there's this other outlet.
Well, wait, and then look how insane this propaganda. And this is on China. Of course, he's totally on board with the new Cold War on China at a cartoonish level. He wrote this insane piece for the Byline Times, which is like a non-existent website. And he wrote in this piece, China has moved toward carrying out the equivalent of a final solution on Uyghur Muslims with plans to kill 1/3, lock up 1/3, and convert 1/3. I mean, what?
Yeah, I don't know where his sourcing even is, but it's...
And then he says, well, it is not possible to prove the veracity of these allegations. The allegations come from U.S. government-funded Uyghur separatist activists.
But it's funny. I mean, just separate from Whirly Man is funny. Like when people always talk about the Uyghur genocide, it's like, why aren't we bombing the railways? Like, why isn't everyone rushing to stop this? It's because they know that it's not happening like that. And there's no evidence of mass killing. So anyway, he just says whatever he wants and gets away with it. People, you'll still see like major blue check mark accounts retweet him and take him seriously. And he is, I don't even know, when he writes for Middle East Eye, I wonder if it's like a Khashoggi operation where they actually have someone ghostwrite for him, because this guy he's got the IQ of a toaster oven. Like he is so fucking stupid. He's like
the IQ of Alaska temperatures in Celsius.
He loses like, you know, he loses Jeopardy competitions to grapefruits. He like is the dumbest motherfucker I've ever come across in media. And then all of a sudden he's writing about the Balkans and like the Tatar situation in Crimea.
He's like, according to my sources in Xinjiang, China.
I mean, that's like, anyway, let's move on.
All right. And then one of the next people, I mean, it's a motley crew of insane neocons and regime change lobbyists. The next guy.
This is kind of where it all started.
Yeah. The next guy who promoted the lawsuit against us. I mean, this guy is one of the weirdest people you can think of. His name is Alexander Reed Ross. He's this anarchist who's like this former punk, but like he never really grew out of like his punk anarchist phase. Like, I mean, I went through a punk anarchist phase, but I grew out of it like when I was
I didn't.
So this is him. You can see with like his AK press hoodie and holding Bakunin, who, by the way, was a hardcore anti-Semite. And this is him.
He supported the Confederacy.
Yeah, who supported he spoke very highly of the U.S. Confederacy. He technically didn't support it, but he said I'm with the Confederacy. They're brave and they're fighting against the authoritarian state in Lincoln. This right here, this Russian anarchist, Mikhail Bakunin, was a hardcore anti-Semite. And meanwhile, here's this guy, Alexander Reed Ross, who's like a liberal Zionist who dedicated his career to try to prove that all anti-imperialists are secret anti-Semites.
It's so weird how he's like, this is this picture right here that you see to the right, I guess, in your screen. It's him doing a book talk about his book, which basically tries to claim that the left is secretly
It's called The Fascist Creep.
And it's like the fascism's creeping into the left because the left is like is not liberal.
And meanwhile, why
is he wearing a hood? He wore a hood through his whole talk. He looks like it looks kind of like he looks like he's got this kind of cherubic face. He looks like some babushka woman who's just like, hello. He doesn't look like a tough anarchist black.
He looks like a
guy.
Minor Threat fan who just never grew up. I liked Minor Threat when I was 18, but I mean, come on, dude. Like,
okay, so anyway, the reason you see all these logos here, if you haven't read the article, he basically works with the cops.
I mean, so he now works at a right-wing think tank. He works alongside former CIA spooks, DHS agents, and cops at this think tank funded by Charles Koch, the right-wing oligarch billionaire. I mean,
and so this is the guy who started out really with the smear campaigns that I think agitated this whole group of people against us, because he published it at the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I mean, I've talked about this a lot, so I'll try to keep it short, but I'd worked with the Southern Poverty Law Center in the past to expose Holocaust deniers doing kind of secret talks in New York. I consulted with them on other investigations, just helped them for free. And then they come out with this series of pieces on me and Ben and everyone. Brian Becker, who is like a veteran anti-racist socialist organizer, and says we're all fascists who are in a secret conspiracy controlled by Vladimir Putin, which sounds very much like the bonkers legal complaint that forms the basis of Sulome's case.
It also just sounds like the FBI.
It's FBI shit, but it's by private operators.
So here's the piece he wrote at the SPLC. Totally insane, batshit article. The multipolar spin: how fascists operationalize left-wing resentment.
Well, you don't need to like show his syncretic chart. He has a syncretic chart in it. Like, these people are fucking unhinged, like next level. And he has a syncretic chart showing all the right and left media and where they intersect. And I mean, it is a damaging narrative that they wanted to mainstream, that there is a red-brown alliance and that those of us who are anti-imperialists are secret fascists because, for example, we don't want the Syrian government to be toppled by Salafi jihadis.
We don't want the U.S. government to be a global dictatorship that controls the entire planet. And what they're saying is, if you oppose that, you're a fascist.
You're a fascist because maybe some people on the alt-right are also against it
Because
for their own
some
reasons.
dumbass alt-right people to be like based on the internet will be like long live Assad, but they don't know anything about Syria. It's nothing to do. It's just like something to troll the libs, to make the libs mad.
Anyway,
so then
the point is that the piece was his pieces were retracted. There were 3 of them. Some of them didn't even concern me. I called up the head of the Southern Poverty Law Center because I knew him because I'd worked with him, Richard Cohen. I said, "Do you know that like this was even published on your site?" And he was like, "I'm so sorry, Max. I didn't even," he has a Southern accent. "I didn't even know that this was there. I can't even believe this. Like, why are we doing this?" And as soon as I hung up the phone, all the pieces were down. And Bill Moran sent them a letter and said, this is, what you did is like potentially libelous, just to warn them, just to put them on notice. Like, you can't be putting this back up, because they said we're looking at it and trying to determine if it's legitimate or not. No, this is straight up slander. And I'm not going to sit there and be lied about. Like, I was sick of years and years of being lied about. I mean, I had years where like where I was accused of inspiring a neo-Nazi to go on a shooting spree of Jews in Kansas City. And it was published in the Free Beacon, and then Haaretz published it. They retracted the article, but I was just sick of being lied about. But we never filed a lawsuit against him. Anyway, after that humiliation where the Southern Poverty Law Center had to apologize to us and everyone he smeared, it really escalated their determination to take us down.
Well, I want to emphasize that the SPLC, not only did they remove all of the articles by this McCarthyite anarcho-neocon Alexander Reed Ross, they also issued an apology to us and to everyone else that he smeared with these lies. One other thing, I mean, people might have seen Alexander Reed Ross just like, again, just show how much of an idiot he is. He wrote this piece for the neocon website Daily Beast, and it's called "These Dirtbag Left Stars Are Flirting with the Far Right." And the whole point is he was going to a whole new level, and he was saying that not only are the anti-imperialist left, like the Grayzone and our friends at like Breakthrough News and Mid Press, that they're supposedly fascist. It's totally absurd smears. But then he went to a whole new level, and he said that like Chapo Trap House and TrueAnon and like the so-called dirtbag left, like the podcast and like in that scene, that they're supposedly all fascist too, because they're supposedly flirting with the far right. Totally ridiculous story, full of a bunch of errors that they had to correct.
And they quietly corrected them because they never retract phony articles. But again, it's a revealing case study of an establishment institution being completely fraudulent, because Noah Shachtman is the editor-in-chief. This is a former Clinton operative, Clinton staffer, someone who's been working at a pretty high level in mainstream media for years. And he signed off on this and even promoted the article simply because he hates us so much. And again, his hatred of us transcended any commitment to journalism, ethics, facts, reality. The liberals, they say, "Oh, we believe in science. We're the reality-based community." Not when it comes to taking on the left, which they actually hate more than the right. So,
yeah, I just want to really quickly, the last thing I say, and we'll move on, but this guy, Alexander Reed Ross, is such a fraud, but unfortunately he's still taken seriously in some left-wing circles, even like radical revolutionary circles, because he calls himself an anarchist, and he used to be involved in anarchist circles before he works for a Charles Koch oligarch-funded think tank, and he works alongside former CIA officials, former DHS, and former cops.
Anyone who has those parentheses around their names it's just basically saying you're an asshole, because it's like saying that you are oppressed as a Jew in the US, that you're actually being targeted, and everyone who now has those around their names is basically at this point a Zionist who is making up allegations of like waves of anti-Semitism and oppression, and is like the most thin-skinned person possible.
By the way, Alexander Reed Ross constantly tries to make like fake left-wing justification for Israel, and I mean, he's a soft Zionist, but
it's basically what's going on here is this is a new way of accusing leftists of anti-Semitism by saying they're involved in a red-brown alliance. It's a more sophisticated way of saying you're an anti-Semite or a self-hating Jew, because defending Israel is just impossible now.
Because it actually is a fascist state.
Yeah.
So what they say is that there are some fascists who oppose Zionism because they're anti-Semites. Unfortunately, that is true, but it's a small minority. The majority of anti-Zionists are anti-racist. They oppose Zionism because they're anti-racist. But what they try to do is they say that we're all in league with anti-Semites. So this is his effusive tweet. I can't describe how deeply I respect and support the decision of Sulome Anderson to stand up to the incessant and debilitating disinformation campaigns launched by these conspiracy theorists whose skins are so thin that they lawyer up to silence the critics they defame. Insane projection of what they do. It's absolutely crazy. But we should move on.
Not do.
Yeah. No, it's just like,
we got Natasha Bertrand in here who's like made up so many Russiagate stories.
These are the people who promoted the lawsuit also.
Zunes. I mean, I don't know if we should go into him, but he's.
Well, I want to mention Kristen Benedict, who is the UK campaigns manager at Amnesty International, promoted this frivolous lawsuit against us, trying to destroy the Grayzone. This is from a so-called human rights organization.
He's like his own thing there, and he's always been promoting the dirty war on Syria, and he stays there no matter what he does, despite the fact that he helped organize the co-sponsorship of a pro-war rally in 2016. So we have Amnesty UK promoting a no-fly zone over Syria, promoting a new regime change war under his watch. He was directly responsible. Let's move on from
here. Yeah, no, but this comment's good. The actual anti-Semitism is the right-wing Christian Zionism like Kufi, who want genocidal war against Israel to fulfill biblical prophecy. And Max actually, ironically, used to cover that deeply, including, I think, at the SPLC sometimes.
I mean, we still do cover it. The actual anti-Semitism is Zionism itself, because it aims to create an entity that is distinct from the multi-confessional, multi-cultural West, where Jews can go and be separate from everyone else. And it provides anti-Semites like John Hagee and Kufi and the Christian Zionists with a place to put the Jews so they don't have to live with them. And that was exactly what Theodore Herzl aimed to create.
And then they have a nuclear war. And if you don't convert, and the Jews who survive, if you don't convert to Christianity, then you're going to to burn in a fiery furnace, as so-called Uyghur expert and evangelical fanatic Adrian Zen says.
No, but Hagee himself said that the Antichrist is he talks like this, and he has his church in San Antonio, Texas, and he said the Antichrist will be homosexual and half Jewish, as Hitler was, with fierce features. He actually said that, and the video's been deleted by his church because it's so revealing of what he believes. But he says with fierce features, he's a homosexual, like he's fierce, like he's,
and this guy,
and he's half Jewish like Hitler. I mean that, and he's the Antichrist. So the Antichrist is Jewish, and Hitler was Jewish, and this is the guy.
He's a prominent figure in the Republican Party too. Like he's a main figure in the Republican Party. Last thing, John Hagee from Kufi, Christians United for Israel, he also claimed that God sent Hitler in order to send the Jewish people back to the land of Palestine. I mean, totally, like, that is insane Nazi shit.
Whatever happened to Shane Bauer? Shady Shane. What happened? Because this guy used to attack me all the time. It was like he was under contract to personally stalk me online, to obsess over me. I pointed out once that he had written more tweets attacking me in 1 week than he had written articles for Mother Jones, where he was like paid on staff in 1 year. Like he barely wrote anything for them. His articles sucked balls. Like they were like, oh, some Proud Boys went to fight with some black bloc guys in Oakland, and it was crazy. Like a bunch of white guys punched each other in the street, and then and then stuff got crazy. And like, wow, man. And then like Democracy Now! Would have him on, like, what? You were, Amy Goodman was like, you were in Oakland where a bunch of white guys went and punched each other with masks on. Talk about that.
This is the shady guy who was just
but his real career, like Ben kind of unearthed a lot of this, and it's pretty mind blowing. Like his claim to fame is very similar to Sulome, is that he was, like her father, held captive by an enemy regime in Iran. He happened to be hiking with two of his pals in a place that wasn't exactly like, it wasn't like Red Rocks Canyon. They just were randomly hiking on the Iranian border while he was teaching.
And they crossed the Iraqi border over into the Iranian border. Gary Brecher, the war nerd, has a really good piece about Shane Bauer, just looking at some of the really weird stuff surrounding Shady Shane's case.
Yeah, well, the main thing is that he was on a Boren scholarship.
Well, that was different. So
no, he was teaching English in Syria on a Defense Department fellowship.
And Yemen. No. It's
Okay,
a little
you correct
different.
the record.
So Shane Bauer, again, this is like this like anarcho-liberal regime changer who writes for mainstream media outlets, and he promoted the lawsuit against us, cheering it on, hoping that this frivolous lawsuit would destroy and bankrupt the Grayzone. A horrible regime changer. Shane Bauer, when after college, he studied Arabic in Syria and Yemen before the war kicked off, in this very important moment of destabilization. And in Syria and Yemen, his Arabic study was funded not only by the U.S. government, but by the U.S. Defense Department through a program called the Boren Fellowship. And by the way, in order to accept a Boren Fellowship, you have to provide at least 1 year of U.S. government service for the federal government. It has to be for a federal government agency after you come back. So according to that, he's on record that he admitted taking that scholarship in his book. And in order to do that, you have to work for the U.S. federal government.
He was also he wrote about it like in detention with an Iranian interrogator, and he was like, "Uh-oh, I hope they don't find out about the Boren Fellowship."
And he told them that it was the State Department, but it was actually the Defense Department. This is in his book. He openly admits it in his book. No one reads these books, and I mean, rightfully, because no one cares about these people.
Like if you really want a good hate read, or you really want to see how sick the millennials that populate our mainstream media who want to be foreign correspondents are. Salome's memoir, I actually have to recommend it. And this book by Shane Bauer sounds like a pretty good entry as well.
Well, then also
be like the Oprah Grayzone book club of like imperialist hate reads. I mean, anyway.
And by the way, if you all remember a little, like in the early 2000s, there was all like this huge regime change campaign focused on Darfur and Sudan. All this coverage, a lot of it was involved with the Israel lobby and all of this, the same kind of figures and neocons. And Shane Bauer, around that same time, he went to Darfur not once, but twice on 2 different summers, he admitted, he boasted. And he admitted also in his book that he crossed into Darfur by crossing the border with Chad, I believe he said. And he crossed with a group of rebels, like the Syrian so-called rebels he's friends with. And this is at a time when these were Western government-backed rebels as part of this operation. So it's like the whole thing is so shady.
And
Shady Shane.
Stuart Newberger
and Sulome Anderson. Oh, sorry, Sulome Anderson.
Not funny. Salome's lawyer actually sued Sudan for a substantial sum, and I don't even believe they showed up in court. It was all part of that operation. Darfur, to me, that was the original Xinjiang, the original like Uyghurs, and it was all about taking people away from anti-war activism into like, targeting an enemy state. Anyway, Shane Bauer was involved in that. Let's move on. Steven Zunes. I mean, he's such a punk. He's such a punk, but I mean, I don't think anyone cares about him. But he always has been attacking me on Facebook. He's this professor at San Francisco State University, I think, who plays a role in some anti-war organizations, but they have all these fake anti-war organizations that like don't do anything and get on Democracy Now! Every once in a while. And Zunes, he really does pose as a man of the left while constantly attacking us. And there was actually a Stephen Gowans article. Stephen Gowans is a very unheralded, great historian and writer who wrote about Zunes' connection to the regime change lobby, to Peter Ackerman, this junk bond salesman who had worked during the Arab Spring to fund so-called civil society groups to topple governments the U.S. didn't want in power anymore. And Zunes is on the board. Zunes is always promoting these Gene Sharp tactics. He's really someone who's deeply invested in regime change tactics. So everyone, it's interesting, like everyone who promoted this lawsuit has their own reasons for promoting it that go well beyond any affection for or acquaintance with Sulome Anderson. And it has to do with their involvement in a regime change lobby that we clearly have been disrupting.
And I just want to stress, I mean, this guy, Steven Zunes, he's not really that important. No one knows who he is really, but these figures are working behind the scenes. And what they've been trying to do for decades is build a so-called left that supports war, that supports regime change, that supports sanctions. This guy supports
like Gilbert Ashkar, people like that.
They claim that we're the true leftists and the true. They even call themselves Marxists, which is hilarious, or socialists or whatever, democratic socialists. And they use these like CIA talking points and State Department talking points. They're State Department socialists to try to justify what is objectively just right-wing wars. So, I mean, it's not a coincidence that these are the same people who are viciously attacking us and promoting this lawsuit.
Who's next?
I mean, I don't even know if it's worth mentioning people like Ramakudai.
I mean, John Schindler, prolific sender of unsolicited dick pics.
All right. Yeah, this guy, John Schindler. Explain who he is really quickly.
I mean, this guy came out of the NSA, and I think like a lot of former spooks, he's exaggerating his own credentials in the national security state. And he's basically just a cheerleader for every war, for the surveillance state. And he hates us. And he was a major Russiagate figure who leveraged his credentials in the NSA to become kind of a prominent Russiagate commentator. But he also sent lots of pictures of his dicks to women who didn't solicit them.
His dicks? He's multiple?
Of his dick.
He has multiple dicks? So this is him, John Schindler, 20 committee on Twitter. This is him promoting Sulome's lawsuit. This is an important move to protect journalists and everybody who's threatened by lies and disinformation spewed by Putin, Assad, and company. Those threats are a lot more than just, in quotes, tweets. Best wishes to Sulome here. I mean, whatever. And what is a cuck-servative? Is he calling himself a cuck? He calls himself on his Twitter account a cuck-servative with a K-U-K.
Well, like it's like the cuck-servatives were like the rhinos. They're
no,
like,
I know what a cuck-servative is, but like he's spelling it K-U-K.
I don't know. He's like a.
Is he saying he's with the Klan, or he's a cuck, or what is he?
He's missing a K. But
yeah.
And I just think that what's significant about it is that like these people were all coordinating together. Like they were encouraged to share the Medium post where she promotes her lawsuit. So she was clearly in touch with them, and they have their own axe to grind with us. But this is someone she's in touch with who's one of the most odious, detestable characters, who apparently was I mean, if you're sending your pictures of your dick to people who don't want it, like
imagine what else you're doing.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next guy we need to mention, someone, Casey Michelle.
And there's nothing wrong if they ask for it. If it's, I'm just
consensual. Okay.
Consensual dick pics.
Max is on the record. He supports consensual dick pics. All right. The next guy who promoted this lawsuit we need to talk about. I mean, you can see here, the reason we're naming all these people, it's because this is like the list of main neocons in the regime change lobby.
This is sort of the Twitter regime change lobby.
Yeah. I mean, not just Twitter. These are the people in the media who promote war and all this disinformation on behalf of the intelligence agencies. The next guy, someone unfairly claimed Casey Michelle was a former colleague of mine. That's absurd because right out of college, I did a brief internship at Think Progress, but I quit after 3 weeks because it was horrible. And I realized how they were all just neocons claiming to be progressives. I was still a young, impressionable. I just got out of college and I quit Think Progress. And I ended up interning instead with Code Pink, one of the best anti-war groups. But it's true. There was this guy who got his start at the Center for American Progress, which we now know is like this insane neoliberal think tank funded by all of. Yeah, I mean,
it's part of the Beltway blob. I actually have an interesting story about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was at a anti-war rally, and a guy came up to me from Think Progress, because it used to be just a progressive.
They used to have some progressive writers there, like they had Li Fang would write there and a few other people. And that's why when I got out of college, I was there for like 3 weeks and I thought maybe I could actually try to write something good. And then I just quit because it was obvious they just wanted propaganda.
Yeah. And so this guy, I don't want to give too many details of his identity, but he said that, there's someone who's in there and it's really alarming. The stuff he writes is really alarming. And we all wonder who the hell he is, because he was just brought in there and given an office out of nowhere. And his name is Casey Michelle, and like he's promoting war and regime change all the time. And I didn't. That's not what I wanted to get involved in. So, it wasn't like there clearly are interests behind him. And he's also worked with you're blocked. He's worked with Freedom House, which is U.S. government funded. He's worked with Thor Halvorson's Regime Change Lobby, Human Rights Foundation. Thor Halvorson is the first cousin of Leopoldo Lopez, the CIA-backed Venezuelan opposition leader.
He also served in the U.S. Peace Corps, and he always boasts it was on Kazakhstan's border with Russia. Not shady at all. In the Peace Corps, which has no links whatsoever. They always stress they have no links to intelligence agencies, and we can definitely believe that.
Honestly, what I think about,
on the Kazakhstan border with Russia.
What I think about, he used to write a blog with Sarah Kendzior, and so I don't want to overestimate him. I mean, Sarah Kendzior is like one of the kookiest people I've ever come across in media. She made up this whole fake Jacobin Benghazi scandal. I don't know if you remember that, where she claimed that Jacobin and Salon were trying to kill her, and it was completely made up.
Jacobin Ghazi.
And then she kind of became a Russiagate. Like she was like the C list of the Russiagators, and she'd come on like Joy Reid's show at 5:30 a.m. on Sunday when like everyone else was nursing a hangover and like no one was watching. But Casey Michel, like I feel like if you look at his trajectory or lack thereof, he's like a lot of these people, like he wants to be a spook or he wants to be in the State Department. And they think by attacking and smearing us that they can appeal to the right elements that will elevate them. But I mean, his work's pretty unspectacular. And he's always like accusing us of being traitors. And he constantly works with these groups. I'm sure he'll be on Democracy Now! At some point if he hasn't.
He constantly works with these groups funded by the Russian right-wing billionaire oligarch Khodorkovsky, which is hilarious because he always has this whole thing, the kleptocracy project, talking about kleptocracy in Eastern Europe and Russia, focused on the oligarchs who support the Russian government, but he never talks about the right-wing Russian oligarch who funds his work.
Right. So someone made a good comment, Operation Mockingbird is complete. And like, yeah, these are the CIA. I don't think it has to covertly pay journalists. Like these people are auditioning to be spooks or they just have them out there openly, like John Schindler. I mean, he's like a low level version of John Brennan being a MSNBC contributor.
And I want to share the funniest moment of Casey Michel. It shows how brilliant this young budding neocon so-called intellectual is. He said in this tweet, I can't open it because he blocked me and I can't get another account right now, but he says, still no idea who's funding that pro-Assad, pro-Kremlin, pro-Maduro Grayzone project site, but someone's running their social media operations from Nicaragua. And I responded, I said, wow, it sure is a mystery who that could be. I smell a conspiracy. I mean, he claimed he was heavily implying on Twitter that we're like a secret Ortega operation run by the Nicaraguan government because I live in Nicaragua.
Well, he didn't know that you lived in.
Yeah, he didn't know.
So I don't know what you do to. Clearly, he or someone in his proximity was trying to run some kind of private investigation on us, and that was the best they could come up with. Was that someone from an IP address in Managua was tweeting our articles and tweeting on and
running our social media
and so he's like, jackpot.
Well, because Facebook does this thing now because of like the whole Russiagate bullshit. They now, if you are in a foreign country, they don't do this for the United States. If you're in a certain country, they will show on your page that this page is based in Nicaragua. So the Grayzone page, it says that the poster is based in Nicaragua because I post mostly on the Facebook page. So like that's just part of this insane.
We'll address
this really quick. Let's do it right now.
No, not right now.
No, let's do it right now. I'm going to forget.
No, I won't forget. Just like
okay.
So basically, anyway, Ben pointed out that he lives in Managua, and it's like, whoa, we need such a like sophisticated operation to go to Nicaragua and like live there and be there and report from there. It's like one of the most open societies. Flights there are cheap. It's very affordable to live there. So perfect place for a journalist to be. Somebody did ask a question that we wanted to. I should have addressed it actually in the article, but it was already pushing 8,700 words, and they said, was Bruce Fine our lawyer because he's listed as our legal counsel, but we were defended in court by Arthur Hawgood, who is Bill Moran's partner. Arthur, first of all, has been in practice for like 6 years. He's my age. He has 2 young kids, as far as I know. He's a young father. works really hard, deals with all kinds of litigation, but was denigrated by Sulome as dime store bullshit, along with Bill, who also was raising a young kid, working his ass off 24/7. And Arthur and Bill won a $3 million judgment against this monstrous character in Michigan who is suing
Flint, Michigan.
He was suing a Flint. He was a public official or someone who was consulted by the governor, I think Rick Snyder, and he was suing a Flint, Michigan mom and other residents of Flint, Michigan, who were saying our water is still dirty. You're wrong, and your assessments on the water are wrong. And he tried to destroy them. And so Bill and Arthur came in and defended this mother in Flint, Michigan. Anyway, they didn't win the $3 million judgment. They defended them against the $3 million lawsuit.
And they won.
I mean,
so they're always who defend the underdogs.
And they've defended a lot of independent media people who've been wrongly accused. And so basically, Stuart Neuberger,
who is Sulome Anderson's lawyer from the corporate law firm.
He included Bill in his complaint to try to, I guess, make him a defendant or made him one of the John Does.
Which blocked him from being our lawyer.
Blocked him from being our lawyer. And then in order for us to get Arthur in,
who was his colleague,
we had to get what's called pro hac vice. Pro hac vice is where you use another lawyer who's licensed to allow you to defend in court. So Bruce Fine is someone that I know through the anti-war scene in DC. He was a Reagan administration official. He comes from the libertarian scene, but he was very active in helping craft the Sanders-Lee resolution to end the war on Yemen. He's really involved in trying to use constitutional law and invoke the Constitution to grant Congress authority to prevent war. His main focus right now is anti-war. So I've run into him a few times and I said, Bruce, we have no way of defending ourselves. Can you just give us pro hac vice? So basically he just did that.
He just put his name on it.
He just put his name on it, but
he didn't actually represent us.
He didn't say a word in court. He didn't contribute to our defense in any other way. So that's basically why his name is.
And I just want to stress this point that was the strategy. Sulome knew that Bill Moran is our lawyer and a friend. So they named him in the case to try to prevent us from using our lawyer in the case. So that was part of the strategy. It's just such a dirty campaign that they didn't want us to use our lawyer. So we wanted to use Bill's partner and he wasn't registered in DC. So it was just another part of this dirty campaign against us. But yeah, in terms of other people,
I mean, I don't know if we want to keep going here. I mean, I think, it's interesting you should just look at our article and we kind of spell out the coordination here. And, the day in court was really funny in some ways because the night before Sulome started tweeting about how her flight was canceled.
Yeah.
And then she just, started just taking down bottles of Merlot. And was just freaking out. She was so angry that her flight was delayed. We were wondering if she was going to show up at all. And she ultimately did show up drunk on her own sense of self-entitlement and, some Cabernet Sauvignon, apparently. And she didn't even sit with her lawyer in the courtroom, Neuberger, who delivered one of the craziest presentations. I mean, he was just rambling. He was screaming at the judge, "You must give us discovery." He was demanding to make Dan Cohen, our friend, a co-defendant because he tweeted mean things about Sulome. And he was very condescending to the judge. The judge was completely perplexed. He actually said, "I've never seen in my life a journalist sue another journalist in local DC court using libel law." And then the judge a lot of this I wasn't able to include in the piece, but Neuberger was using as his precedent man versus competitive enterprise, which I don't know if there's anyone watching who's interested in law, but this is a case where the Competitive Enterprise Institute, which is a corporate funded right-wing think tank, went after a climate scientist named Mann and compared him to Jerry Sandusky and said that this was
a child molester.
It said that this was in the National Review, the right-wing publication, that he was molesting the data. So Mann sued Competitive Enterprise for saying that about him. And that was their basis that, So Neuberger starts screaming at the judge, "Man versus competitive enterprise," because I think what happened was several people encouraged by Competitive Enterprise Institute in that article started accusing Mann of being a molester. And so he said that, this campaign of defamation led to many other people smearing him. That's where the John Does came in. And so Neuberger was like, you must honor Mann versus Competitive Enterprise. And the Judge Jackson, he sits there and he says, that's about someone accusing someone else of being a molester. Right. And he says like, right. Like, and then, and Neuberger says, exactly. And the judge is like, okay, because clearly we didn't call her a child molester or anything like that. So
we also, and I want to clarify the whole, another point of this lawsuit, aside from the fishing expedition and bankrupting us, the strategy was that they were trying to hold us accountable for what random people on Twitter said. We never accused Sulome Anderson of being a spy. I do not think she's a spy. She's too dumb to be a spy. But the whole strategy of the lawsuit, what Max is talking about, and this is what the judge was confused about. Stuart Neuberger kept saying, you have to give us discovery so we can prove the connections between the John Does, including an unknown Twitter user using the name time-traveling Russian hacker. And you have to give us discovery so we can prove the connections with these other people who called Sulome a spy, even though we have no evidence that these people are linked to the defendants, Max and me, in any way, because they weren't. We have no idea who those people are, and we've never claimed she's a spy because she's too dumb to be a spy.
Yes. Yeah, we never did. We never implied it or anything. I want to get to that point in a second because you brought up a really salient point. But just to kind of recap the hearing, so the case is just falling apart right in front of her eyes, and she's not even sitting with her lawyer to let the judge know that she actually showed up or cares. She's sitting in the witness gallery, and she's sitting there with this vacant look on her face, twirling her hair the whole time, like just completely. She looked completely out of it. Obviously, wouldn't make eye contact with us. And what she had done was really abused a local court. She's like this out of town, pampered heiress who came in from Toronto, where she's living, into DC in order to disrupt a court, take up their resources, take up a judge's time, and for the most frivolous, ridiculous case. And she's just sitting there oblivious to the fact that the whole thing was a gigantic sham and was falling apart in front of her eyes. And her lawyer is like a chicken with his head cut off, just running around trying to come up with any legal justification for the judge to do something. I don't know what, it was almost like she had something on Neuberger, because why would he subject himself to that kind of humiliation? Like, I hope there are people in the DC legal world and in the legal world who are paying attention to the fact that Neuberger did this and that this is a stain on his record.
From one of the top corporate law firms in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, they had an entire team preparing their lawsuit. They had like
students. They
had a courier show up to serve me at my house, and he was like pounding on my door and waiting outside my house for me in his car, like for hours. And like one time, like I wasn't home, and people told me there's been a guy like waiting outside your house for a few hours. My neighbors were telling me that. I mean, this is the kind of resources they had. They showed up at Ben's door as well. So,
but in the courtroom, they showed up with like 3 young students or law,
yeah,
like some like
he showed up
paralegals or something,
and he was like teaching them. He's like, "This is how you get it done, son.
This is how you do lawfare."
They looked like kind of like young Jewish law students who were like, I remember one might have been wearing a kippah, who wanted to like learn how to defend Israel from a master against one of the worst anti-Semites in the world, Max Blumenthal. That's kind of what the vibe I got. But I mean, I wish they had. I hope they're paying attention too, because you just got completely owned by the dime store lawyers. So back to this point, I want, because you brought it up. She was kind of claiming that we were threatening her safety by she invoked
her argument in the suit, which is insane because we never said it, is that these John Does, which is just the term they use in court for a random person on Twitter, these unknown people accused her of being CIA and Mossad, which we never did and never would, because I don't think it's true, because again, she's too dumb to be a spy. And so what they said is that there was this conspiracy between us and them. So they have to get discovery, which means they have to get all of our private communications to prove the connections with them. And she said that we did irreparable damage to her career because now in the Middle East, where she sometimes reports, although she doesn't report there very much, that now she can't do her work because people there think she's Mossad and CIA because of these random people on Twitter who have no relation to us. I mean, it's totally absurd. And I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that she's published all these bogus stories with 168 word, 7-paragraph corrections.
Well, and we haven't even gotten into what I think one of the biggest scandals in media that we've unveiled recently at the Grayzone, which is who her fixer is. But just to this point, there's this whole culture within elite Western media of putting journalists into dangerous situations and blurring the line between them and intelligence agents and weaponizing them against, quote unquote regimes that the US wants to topple. Great example would be Clarissa Ward going after the FSB, Russia's intelligence service in Moscow, and then just taking a plane right out in this coordinated operation she ran with the NATO-sponsored Bellingcat operation.
I also want to stress that recently the former top Syria envoy for the Trump administration admitted in a PBS interview, 60 Minutes, that the U.S. government, the State Department, intelligence agencies use people in the media as contacts to speak with Salafi jihadist rebels in Syria, including rebranded Syrian Al-Qaeda.
Right. So
they're admitting that those so-called journalists are intelligence assets.
And they're the ones blurring the lines and putting journalists in danger that way. But the point is actually to use journalists kind of as, human shields or pawns, and to get them in danger and then use them as collateral against those governments, and to say, well, you're holding Austin Tice or whoever, you're holding this person or you're threatening this person and we're going to come after you. And what Sulome was doing was to go after actually like domestic independent journalists using that same agenda or tactic to target us, to claim that we are putting people in danger. But what we do, and what I will not deny, I'm proud of this, is we show how specific journalists work with opposition movements in countries that are sponsored by the US, hand in glove, to promote regime change narratives and publish false stories in their service. We show how the Beltway Press Corps functions as State Department stenographers. We show how they use unnamed official intelligence sources as legitimate sources. We show how the whole US media has basically been co-opted in so many ways by the intelligence services as a force multiplier, and that they're not actually doing journalism. They're participating in information warfare, which is an aspect of the hybrid warfare that forms the core of the US strategy against all independent and socialist states that it wants to topple. So we don't deny that, but that's that's another aspect of her case. And it's something that we'll be seeing more and more from these phony hacks who go cover conflict zones. They're not going to present both sides. They're there as part of the US regime's strategy.
And we're almost at 2 hours, so I think we're going to start wrapping up soon. There's a few things I want to mention before we conclude. One is there was a really hilarious moment that also, just going back really quickly to this entitled multimillionaire who sued us and tried to destroy our lives. I just want to show you what kind of person this is. So here's Sulome Anderson. I mentioned in the article, and I mentioned earlier, that she published a story in Newsweek that had this massive 168 word correction. And after that, a Lebanese writer who knows a lot about Hezbollah, actual Hezbollah, he published a Medium article exposing all of these falsehoods and errors, just hilarious errors in her story. So after that, several months later, the U.S. government arrested a guy in the U.S. named Ali Karani and accused him of being some kind of like Hezbollah sleeper cell. And she tweeted, just saw the news that Ali Karani was arrested for being Islamic Jihad sleeper agent. That would be quite a threat. Brace yourself. And then our friend Laith Abu Fadl, a good reporter, he said, it's a different Ali. The one you tagged is in Lebanon. That guy was arrested in New York City. And then she she quoted a tweet from Ali Krani, the Lebanese Ali Krani, not the American Ali Krani, who said, "Tweeting this from my jail cell in New York. Officers keep asking me." So
he was
joking.
He was taking the piss. So basically, she was so happy that she thought that someone who had embarrassed her online was actually arrested as an Islamic Jihad agent.
She said, "Nope, it's him." And then she says, "Was he kidding? Oh, holy shit. He was kidding."
So, another great moment. I mean, there are so many
genius.
So many golden tweets of hers. Like there's one where she's like, she's looking at Iraqi soldiers with Iraqi flags on her uniform.
Oh, I have to show this.
What badge is that? I mean, but I want to jump into
this has to be pointed out. I mean, keep in mind, this is the person who tried to destroy our lives and destroy the Grayzone and bankrupt it by claiming that we did irreparable damage to her career, supposedly as a Middle East correspondent. And she tweets stuff like this: "Found this photo, recognized the badge. I don't, to be honest." And then this guy, Iraqi security, a good account, he said, "Hey, Sulome, you seem to be having some trouble. I hope this helps." And then it's the Iraqi flag. It's cut off here, but she says, "Lol, I know what the flag of Iraq looks like. I posted hastily and didn't look closely. I just saw a badge." So she didn't even recognize the Iraqi flag. And she's saying that we did so much damage to her career that she has to sue us.
Right. Well, it's like you're claiming to be some kind of Middle East expert. But here's the this isn't just about Sulome Anderson, who, otherwise would be kind of an insignificant figure if she hadn't sued us for at least $1 million. It's about the whole culture of the Western hack pack, specifically in Beirut, which has been Mecca for all sorts of elements that were interested in the dirty war in Syria. I mean, you got, these nihilistic conflict tourists and grim Western bureaucrats who think that, as I wrote, throwing back Jaeger bombs on the edge of austere Shia enclaves is an act of revolutionary transgressiveness. And then you've got the hacks, the journalists. And I've spent time in Beirut. I've gotten to meet a lot of these characters, and they are really decadent and not necessarily very effective. I don't claim to be some Arabic speaker or expert on the region. I stand by, I'll be judged by my reporting, but a lot of them speak either no Arabic or have really no idea where they are. And they're basically parachute journalists. And, if you know Beirut, there's Hamra. It's the main boulevard where there's all these bars that the expats hang out at, and they don't really know anything beyond that. And so they rely on fixers. And if you're clever, you can convince any of these people from working for the most esteemed mainstream publications that they're speaking to a Hezbollah commander, because they have no idea where the hell they are. If you just take them to meet some Shia guys, and let's say one of these reporters that comes to you as a fixer is a multimillionaire who inherited a ton of money, then you say, "Okay, give me 10 grand and I'll get you your story. I'll get you the best story ever." And then they go to their editors and they say, "Okay, I got 6 Hezbollah commanders." And the editors are they're fucking jizzing in their pants. They're like, "This is going to be awesome. She did it. And she's the daughter of Terry Anderson. We've got this great reporter out there." Little do they know that basically this hustler is paying a bunch of his neighbors from Dahiya, this Shia area, to pose as Hezbollah commanders or Hezbollah fighters and just tell her anything. And then they can play some videos of combat off their phone that, for all we know, they downloaded off YouTube. And so that's precisely what happened. And we've been hearing about this operation for a long time because there's just all these jokes. It's like Thomas Friedman and his taxi drivers. There's all these jokes on Twitter about the Hezbollah commanders that get interviewed by Western journalists. When we finally cracked open Salome's memoir, we got the name of the fixer, Dergum. And this was the name that I'd been hearing about. He was referred to as D by other journalists. And Sulome also referred to this one particularly terrible hack, Mitch Prothero, as her mentor and someone who introduced her to Dergum. So I put 2 and 2 together. I was like, What was the worst article about Hezbollah ever written that was so obviously phony that we were all mocking forever? It was Paintballing with Hezbollah, where Mitch Prothero back in 2012 at Vice, classic Vice article, claimed that he and his dork squad in Beirut of like Western hacks and like Andrew Exum, who went on to work at the Pentagon and like admitted to killing 2 Iraqi civilians when he was an Army Ranger. They played a paintball match with Hezbollah that was set up by Durgam. We don't know who they're playing paintball with, but Hezbollah, let me tell you something. There's an organization, it survives for a reason. This is an organization that's under pressure from the two of the most powerful intelligence services and militaries in human history.
The CIA and Mossad.
The CIA and Mossad and the US and Israeli militaries. And it continues to grow and thrive politically. And that's because they don't play paintball with dumbasses like
photo. Do you really think these guys are like, they're such good journalists that Hezbollah is going to go play paintball with them? It's so insane. So
and these are the Hezbollah guys, supposedly. We don't know who they are. We never know who these guys are.
Durgam's friends.
And neither does Sulome. So in one article that Durgam set up for Sulome, she said she confirmed they were commanders because they showed her combat footage on their cell phones. And then she claimed that they shot down an Israeli F-16, which there's no way that Hezbollah did that in Syria. And the proof was that one of them showed them a meme of the plane going down. And this was published in The Nation. Shout out to Roan Carey, one of the worst editors in all media, who signed off on that article and has like turned The Nation into like just like Democracy Now! And The Intercept, just like anything but an anti-war publication.
Well, I want to quote from her book here, because this is just so revealing about, we were talking about her failing up, this rich, entitled woman who just inherited millions of dollars and has always failed up and given everything on a silver platter. She admits, this is from her book, Sulome Anderson, who sued us. She says, she's talking about Mitch Prothero, the guy who did the fake paintballing with Hezbollah story for Vice. Mitch introduced me to the single most important person in my journalism career, my favorite fixer, Durgam, a semi-gangster who's on friendly terms with practically every shady character in Lebanon. D, as I've always called him, has had a long list of questionable career choices.
But he's honest, she says. He's not honest, but he's honest. How does she know he's honest?
And when he likes you, he'll go to the ends of the earth to help you get a story. What she doesn't mention is at a cost, at a price.
And you know what I've heard from actual reporters in Lebanon and actual Middle East experts who are based in Beirut is that Durgam was deported from the United States for a laundry list of felonies, including drug dealing. And so basically Sulome reverted to her traditional role once she was in Beirut of being a human ATM machine for drug dealers and knaves and assorted low-level gangsters, and got duped. I mean, she says, "I freely admit he opened many doors for me and continues to do so to this day." And like, where did those doors lead? It led to the 168 word correction. It led her down
to bogus stories.
It led her down into like a comedy of errors.
And this is, again, I want to she's admitting it all. The single most important person in her journalism career is a fraudster.
And so we were sued because Ben pointed out merely that she admitted that one of her Hezbollah sources was unreliable. We didn't even write this story.
I hadn't even read her book at the time. And because of this frivolous lawsuit, I read her book and I saw that there's all this other stuff admitting that the most important person in her career is a fraudster who has been the fixer to help create other bogus stories. I mean, it's incredible. And it's also a dealer, a drug dealer.
Can we read some of these super chats just to like...
Yeah. There's a lot of great super chats here. Thanks to Funky Lollipop. Your work is needed. Thank you, Funky Lollipop. Thank you to Stephanie Welsh. Glad you can talk about the lawsuit and expose the attempts. Thank you to None OYB. Thanks to Deborah Slattery. Thanks to guys for happy birthday to Assange on July 3rd. There was a lot of other super chats. Thank you to everyone so much for the super chats. It means a lot. I mean, that's what keeps the show going, right? That keeps the Grayzone going is your donations. And I saw someone on Twitter point out that people always ask what funds the Grayzone, and they're saying it's going to be the lawyers' fees from this lawsuit.
We wouldn't get that. That would be Arthur Hallgood, who defended us in court and logged a lot of hours, unfortunately, and that seems likely that this could be a costly lawsuit for someone who abused DC's court system. It's really scandalous what she did, and it's funny that this doesn't get reported on in any legal journal, considering there is significant precedent that's been set in this lawsuit. It's like there's so much that doesn't get reported. It's not, the mainstream press still hasn't reported on the explosive revelation that Siggy, the hacker, who was the central witness in the U.S. espionage case against Julian Assange, has been revealed as a convicted child molester and liar and fraud, and that the whole case has just completely collapsed before our eyes. So I don't expect.
But Assange is in prison, and they just released Bill Cosby, and Assange is being tortured still.
Yeah,
I mean, it's insane.
I mean, maybe it's because Assange didn't do ads for Puddin' Pops, but I think it has to do with the fact that, unlike Bill Cosby, Julian Assange told the truth.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, Bill Cosby, I'm glad you actually brought that up. I mean, because Bill Cosby, he's not an apolitical figure. I remember seeing Mitt Romney, when he was campaigning for president in the 2008 campaign, give a whole speech about how awesome Bill Cosby was. Thank God. He was like, thank God for Bill Cosby and what he's doing out there. Because Bill Cosby went on a national tour wagging his finger at black people for being criminals and told them, stop with all these civil rights campaigns and asking for stuff from the government and asking for all these social programs and complaining about the cops doing this or that to you. I really want to go into a Bill Cosby voice, but I don't know if that's like,
oh no, don't do it. Don't do it.
But and just take responsibility. I remember he's talking about a kid who was shoplifting, a black youth who was shot while shoplifting. And he was like, what was he doing stealing that loaf of bread? Like, that was his applause line. So all the white conservatives love Bill Cosby. And I think that's a factor here. That's a factor, just as the conservative establishment, ruling class. I mean, the liberals are conservative too in this country. They hate Julian Assange because he told the truth. And so that's how our justice system basically functions. I think our case went our way because it wasn't a national security case. It was in a city court with just an honest city judge. But you look at what would happen with Julian Assange if he came to the Northern Virginia district, where Leona Brinkema rules on all of these national security cases. The evidence presented against him would be kept secret because there wouldn't be any. He wouldn't really be able to present a defense. And as I reported at the Grayzone, with files and documents from a Spanish court where a CIA asset is on trial who spied on Assange, Julian and his lawyers were spied on. So he had no attorney-client privilege, and there's no way you can have a free and fair trial.
I just want to point out before you wrap up here, this is something pretty funny. My friendly guy, thanks for the super chat, said, I thought Sulome Anderson sounded familiar. Then I remembered this humiliating interview with David Pakman, searching on YouTube. And, I've had a lot of political disagreements with David Pakman. His stuff on Latin America, especially Bolivia and Venezuela, has been awful. But he deserves credit for this. He debated her on Islamic female genital mutilation, and it was just like so embarrassing. And she made such a fool of herself. And if she hadn't been like this entitled heiress who just inherited millions of dollars and had failed up her entire life, she might have learned a lesson from that experience and tried to stop doing these stories she knows nothing about. But, we see, again, what happens when you're an entitled multimillionaire who's been given everything.
Someone saying pro bono lawyer, I had to come out of pocket. Like, this was meant to harass us and deprive us of whatever money we work for. So, I mean, these are people lawyers who worked many hours to defend us, and they deserve to be paid back. We deserve to be paid back for that. This is just, it was a disgusting assault on us, and we don't have a lot of resources. I never inherited anything. I'm definitely I'm like a white Jewish guy with a lot of good education. So I'm privileged in that respect. And My family has, everyone who knows who my family is, but I never inherited any money. I work for what I have, and we deserve to be paid back here. This is just a horrendous assault on us personally, on a free press, on online journalism. Our lawyers were mercilessly smeared. Bill Moran, when he actually brought his young son to my book event, which I had to hold at an alternative location because the same people who promoted Sulome's disgusting McCarthyite lawsuit waged a campaign to intimidate a bookstore into not hosting a talk for my book, Management of Savagery. When Bill showed up there, I believe it was Jett Goldsmith, who we talked about before.
One of these neocons
threatened to call Child Protective Services on him for bringing his son to my book talk. So they go after the kids of our lawyers. They're the most disgusting element, and they continue to publish in mainstream media. They continue to enjoy ties to the Committee to Protect Journalists, and there needs to be some justice here, and the justice needs to come in the form of lawyers' fees. You have a lot of resources. Well, shut the hell up about your fake spiritual new age coming consciousness and pay our damn lawyers' fees.
Pay our lawyers' fees.
Yeah. I'm literally shaking right now that you're not paying our lawyers' fees.
Yeah, and I just want to say, the whole
those guys
healing,
work hard for the money.
Yeah, the healing thing, and again, I've said this again.
Did we put those tweets up yet?
I'll put it up really quickly, just because it's so shameless. Because this is the only response that Sulome Anderson has said in response to this lawsuit. She doesn't even mention the lawsuit. She says, "I'm fine and stand by my journalism. It's not journalism. It's bogus and it's been exposed. And I will never be ashamed of writing about my struggles with mental illness and drug abuse." That's not what this is about. It's not about this in any way. And she's trying to make herself the victim. And it's so sickening to people who, especially working class and poor people who suffer from mental illness and drug abuse. This is about entitlement. And to use a term that's become very popular on Twitter, stop gaslighting. She's gaslighting the world. She's trying to portray herself as the victim. She's not the victim. She filed a $1 million lawsuit with a right-wing lawyer from one of the largest corporate law firms in the world. She is a heiress that inherited millions of dollars that were seized from the Iranian people by the U.S. government and given to her. And she tried to destroy our career. Neither of us has much money. I don't come from a background with money either. And she tried to destroy our outlet. And now she wants people to think that she is the victim. She had this PR sounding 4-tweet thread, and people, they responded to it and saying how absurd this is and how insulting it is to people who suffer from mental illness and addiction.
It's like she says, go back to so I can see it. "I am proof that healing is possible." No, you're not. That's the opposite of what you are. You are proof of a deep sickness that goes well beyond any mental illness or addiction. It's an imperial sickness. It is an elite entitlement, an elite, arrogant hubris that is very familiar to the people who design and control our empire. Where you're actually your money came from a country that had a revolution that has been historically very poor, besieged, under threat of invasion, and then you went out and continued to demonize that country and its allies. And to make the threat of war against it more likely. That goes beyond any sickness that can be diagnosed in the medical profession. You deserve no sympathy. You deserve pure contempt for that. And
look at this arrogance. Look at this tweet. She's trying to portray herself as a victim now, but a few years ago she was tweeting, "I can't wait for the look on your face when your client is served." This is a letter. This is a comment to our lawyer. "You're playing with the big boys. No dime store bullshit here. I have a huge population of real journalists who can't wait to take Blumenthal and his fake news machine down." This is the entitlement we're talking about. She's not a victim. Again, this is actual gaslighting. We hear this term all the time. This is actual gaslighting.
Yeah, and it's so typical to fall back on trauma. They pull the trauma card as if that gets you out of any accountability. No, it's just not going to work here. We're not. Yeah, okay. You thought that was going to work because we're the defendants are two white guys or something, cisgendered heteropatriarchal males or whatever. Like, I don't know, that manipulation just is not going to work at this point.
It also doesn't work in a court of law, and the judge saw through it immediately.
Yes. And I don't know what she plans to do at this point, but as Glenn Greenwald pointed out, the only thing that can be done here is to apologize for what you've done and to take responsibility for it. You're not proof that healing is possible when you take no responsibility for not only the horrific things you have done to destroy us, the McCarthyite campaign of smears that you and the real journalists you had at your disposal leveled against us, but you also stand by your journalism. That is not journalism. Like, it's been exposed as false. And so you have all these stories in Newsweek, Foreign Policy, The Nation, I don't know where else they are. You have all these stories that are just absolutely fake. The sources in there are not Hezbollah sources. Their stories need to be retracted. The letterhead that the stories are carried under are discredited because they still carry these stories that have been exposed as fake. And you're standing by that. That's not healing when you stand by that. Okay. And we didn't even talk about the insane PR stunt she did at the Columbia Journalism Review, where she had her friend from Columbia Journalism School write an article to rehabilitate her reputation about how Donald Trump is responsible for her inability to get published by the big time media outlets like the Atlantic and the New York Times. I mean, and the article starts with the following. It actually says this: Sulome Anderson is one of the most impressive young journalists of our time. Like, don't piss on my head and tell me it's raining. Like, do you really think we're that stupid?
Look at this. And this is, again, written by her friend from school. But
by the way, Ben Norton is one of the most impressive young journalists of our time.
I don't know about that.
I don't have any association with him. It's just an objective statement. But
look at this. And this is the funniest line in the article. I can't make a living reporting from the Middle East anymore. She inherited $6 million. Her family inherited $40 million in seized assets from Iran. And she's complaining she can't make a living reporting from the Middle East doing bogus stories with fake Hezbollah sources. And it's Trump's fault. Incredible.
Where's the quote where she says, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. Yeah. Open any American news outlet, and it's just Trump, Trump, Trump. Whether that's the case, there's very limited space for news that's not about him. Right. Okay.
Well, we agreed with that when he was in power.
Yeah. Keeping that in mind, her friend claims in here that basically Mike Pompeo put out this $7 million bounty for a Shia guy who he claimed was responsible for the bombing of a Jewish community center in Buenos Aires, Argentina in the 90s. And obviously Pompeo is trying to get the Lima group, these right-wing vassal states, on the side of the U.S. in its maximum pressure campaign against Iran. And so they put out this bounty. And Sulome Anderson's friend, Yardina Schwartz, who's based in Tel Aviv, of course, says that Sulome had actually gotten to know that guy's family through her Hezbollah sources and was actually willing and eager to help the Trump administration get its man. So she's complaining that she doesn't have any Trump angles, but she's volunteering herself as like a freelance investigator and snitch for the Mike Pompeo and the Trump administration in their bid to destroy Iran in this very suspect bounty.
And look how insane this is. In October 2017, Sulome thought, emphasis on thought, operative word, she had landed the story of her career. The U.S. had just announced a $7 million award for Hezbollah operative believed to be scouting locations for terror attacks on American soil. That's absolutely insane. Hezbollah has never targeted U.S. soil and never will. It is a domestic indigenous resistance group where are its origins? In the illegal Israeli military occupation of South Lebanon. It is a local resistance group. It doesn't do attacks on civilians. It attacks military targets.
She also claimed that she had gotten exclusive info on it having surface-to-air missiles.
Look at, I mean, this is insane. Hezbollah members, they told this woman who is deeply anti-Hezbollah, supposedly they told her they had plans to strike U.S. government and military targets on American soil.
And that they had surface-to-air missiles.
Why would they tell someone who they know is deeply anti-Hezbollah? This is insane. It's totally fake.
Yeah, and she's actually publicly celebrated the death of Hezbollah's most famous martyr, Imad Mugniya, she publicly celebrated his death on Twitter. So why would they talk to her? But also wow, she has exclusive surface-to-air missile information. Like, they've announced that they had surface-to-air missiles. They've said it for years.
It was secret information that had only been disclosed publicly by the leader, Hassan Nasrallah.
Anyway,
all you have to do is be able to understand Arabic.
So anyway,
look at this tweet from her. According to Newsweek, the CIA and Israel killed. I mean, this is, again, one of the main Hezbollah leaders. And she said, "Can't say I cried." She claims he kidnapped her dad. Again, it actually might have been a different Shia group in Lebanon, but "can't say I cried." This is basically her praising the CIA and Israel killing a significant leader in Hezbollah. So we're supposed to believe that they would tell her what their plans were to attack U.S. soil, which they've never done and never will do. It's absolutely insane. And another line in this insane article: having interviewed Hezbollah fighters, supposedly, it should be in scare quotes, for the last 6 years, Sulome had unique access to the upper echelons of its militants. That is insane. An actual Hezbollah expert, Mossad, a professor in Lebanon, has said that she, who is Shia, who is Lebanese, who has lived her life in Lebanon and is an actual expert and professor, she has said that even she can't get many interviews with top officials in Hezbollah. And when she does it, it is like maximum high security. They put her like in a car with the thing over her head and she can't figure out where she's going. But we're supposed to believe that this American who has a deep grudge against Hezbollah, and she's written, every article she's written is anti-Hezbollah. That they're going to tell her sensitive information.
I actually went to Hezbollah's media office in 2011 in Dahia, and I met with the head of their media department, and we talked for an hour. He meets many journalists, and at the end of the meeting, he said to me, "This meeting never happened. This was totally off the record. You can't report anything I said. You were never here." And, I was like, damn. But I mean, I wasn't going to violate what he told me, because if anyone says that to me, then that's what you have to do. So I never wrote about it. And that's the way they are. I mean, he's just the face of the organization that talks to the media. So he would never, ever provide information about weapons systems,
yet alone upper echelon members. That's
and
totally
they have files on journalists. They know who everyone is. In their media office, they'll determine if you're someone they want to talk more to. But when they give journalists access, it's like something they decide on in advance. For example, when Hezbollah liberated Arsal, this area right on the Syrian border that had been occupied by the Syrian Al-Qaeda faction, Jabhat al-Nusra, they brought journalists up in a caravan and let them all see what they had done there. And then the journalists promptly left. So it's a very controlled organization. And again, this is a huge scandal because so many stories were published that are fake. Where are the media watchdogs? They don't care, because this is about an organization that we want to demonize, and we want these wars. So it's okay to just make stuff up. It's okay to make stuff up about us, because we're genocide deniers and all that. And that's the culture that we're talking about.
Kremlin chills. I mean, whatever smear it is this week, it always
I don't know if we have anything else to add here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna end with the printout again of this is what we went into court with, and the judge saw it. I mean, and what's funny is I remember he said to Sulome and her lawyer, he was like, "Well, can't you understand why this false information you tweeted is actually kind of a big deal, and like you could have actually fueled a regional war by claiming that Iran was firing missiles into Israel."
I mean, I wish Court TV was there, because the judge, the look on his face throughout the whole
he was so
presentation
confused.
Was just sheer exasperation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful to our lawyer Bill and to his colleague Arthur. And again, I mean, they unfortunately, through these deceptive tactics, tried to kick Bill off the case, but their firm has been very supportive. And if anyone ever, if any of our audience, if they ever need legal assistance,
well, I don't know if we can volunteer there.
No, I mean, you have to pay like any lawyer. We had to pay too, but I mean, it's like, these are people who I'm grateful to for defending us, because this was so clearly a political case. And
well, we're grateful for our audience and everyone who supports us on Patreon and who supported us here. I mean, that's how we keep going, and we're just gonna, we're gonna keep going more intensely than before. When this lawsuit was waged against us, we were in a much more, I wouldn't say precarious, but we were in a different place than we are now because of our audience and because of you. And it was a much different time politically, where it was much harder to speak out about the phony Russiagate narrative, the dirty war in Syria, so many things that have defined our coverage. So I feel like we're in a different place now. I feel much more confident, but again, these campaigns will not end, whether they're private campaigns or they're official campaigns against Julian Assange and others, or the smears of the OPCW whistleblowers, the seizure by the U.S. government of 30 websites, including Iran's main English language website, the labeling of RT and Sputnik as foreign agents and everyone associated with them. I mean, these are all part of the same kind of free speech. This is part of the same national security state attack on free speech and press freedom. And we have to continue to fight it, and we will. And we're going to expand. I'm going to be starting a new live stream every week on Rockfin, which is an important platform because of the YouTube algorithm, which is killing us, and the censorship on YouTube. They don't play that. You can also find us at Minds. We're putting more and more of our videos at Minds, just because we need alternatives to YouTube's. But I will be every Friday live streaming at Rockfin, and kind of wrapping up what we're doing at the Grayzone, and just ranting like we've been doing today. So we're just going to be doing more and more of this. I think that's the ultimate way to hit back against these silencing campaigns.
Yeah, and I'll just conclude saying we want to thank everyone. Unfortunately, it keeps hiding some of the super chats, but we want to thank all of the people, all the super chats: Funky, Lollipop, Skip Sturts, Katie, Megs. I'm bad with these last names, but thank you to everyone. Someone asked if Max's new show will be only on Rockfin. Yeah, it's
exclusive to Rockfin. We're gonna set up the channel today, and I'll announce it on Twitter. So stay tuned for that.
But we are gonna, of course, still do streams here on YouTube until hopefully they never do. But until they kick us off, I mean, it's important to reach as many people as we can, and we're gonna keep posting stuff on here. We're just trying to diversify our platforms because big tech has just monopolized so many of these platforms. We want to back things up. So we'll be on here. I was supposed to put this also on Twitch, but it wasn't working. I need to figure out the streaming with Twitch better, but you can also find us at twitch.tv/The Grayzone News. And definitely check out, we have some new reports coming out soon, some new videos. Max and I are working on a documentary about Nicaragua. So lots of good content coming. And it's a real pleasure for us. One of the biggest pleasures is just seeing everyone commenting. We had almost 3,000 people at the peak, and we still have over 2,000. So it's really cool to see everyone, to engage with our audience, to talk about stuff. And I mean, it helps us keep going, right? Because sometimes it can be kind of hard, like when you're facing frivolous lawsuits, but seeing the response has been really uplifting.
Definitely. So we'll see you all soon. And thanks for all your support once again.
And for anyone who maybe caught the beginning of this stream, of course, you can go back and watch it, but I'm going to be posting an audio version as a podcast, and you can find that at Moderate Rebels down here. It's our podcast, and that'll be up soon as a podcast version. And you can support this show at patreon.com/Moderate Rebels. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to the super chats. Thanks to all the commenters. And we'll be back soon for another stream. See you next time.